His expression turned manic. His Buddhist heart shattered. Dewey Arhat put his palms together, and a voice like ancient dust echoed, "Dispel affliction, and the Buddhist heart will be clear." The frenzied monk seemed to be struck by a heavy blow. His form briefly showed clarity, before he fell to his knees with a thud. His face still struggled, but he was no longer deranged. Ordinary people had no concept of Mahayana or Hinayana Buddhism. Thus, they couldn't understand the monk's sudden outburst. Under the Bodhi tree, the old monk continued pondering Mahayana Buddhism. After a long while, he reached enlightenment. With a smile of clarity, his body radiating Buddhist charm, he said, "Thank you, benefactor, for your guidance. I have now reached enlightenment." Suqianan, feeling complicated, thought, "You actually attained enlightenment? I didn't expect that my casual ramblings would lead to a great monk's enlightenment today." The old monk continued. Back when Wanin was still a 4th-grade ascetic monk, he harbored doubts. Why couldn't he become a Buddha? That obsession lingered in his heart for countless years, until he neared the end of his lifespan. He finally realized there is only one Buddha in this world, and that is the Tathagata. Thus, he manifested me, attaining the bodhisattva fruit status. The old monk gazed at Suqianan, but it seemed as though he was looking past him, seeing his distant self in the West. "I have sat in this secret realm for years, unable to comprehend how to become a Buddha, or why I could not become a Buddha." At last, he clasped his hands together and told himself, "I am Buddha. Buddha is me. Amitba. Thank you, benefactor, for your guidance." Now he finally understood. Buddhahood is not tied to rank. Suqianan sincerely said, "Master, seeing your nature and realizing Buddhahood, this is not my doing." Although his words had served as a trigger, the enlightenment was ultimately due to the master's own accumulation. Behind him, clarity opened. On the rooftop of a tea house, Chu Yuan asked the Grandmaster Heng Yuan beside him, "What are they talking about?" Heng Yuan seemed not to hear, murmuring instead, "Like viewing flowers in the mist. Flowers in the mist. Lord Su, make it clearer. Say it more clearly." Chu Yuan's face darkened. Su Ningyan's words, they had such a profound impact on the Buddhists, and those nobles weren't much better off. What did they just mean by that? Did moving their lips count as passing the trial? Wei Yuan stared at Suqianan's figure, his expression deeply complicated. This kid's insights are almost inhuman. Inside the painting, Suqianan felt a surge of joy. Is this trial finally over? Better head up to the temple on the summit first. Just as he turned to leave, a booming voice rang out. It echoed across the entire Buddha mountain. "What is Mahayana Buddhism? What is Hinayana Buddhism? Lord Su, explain before you leave." Suqianan frowned. He recognized it as the voice of Dewey Arhat. What's going on with him suddenly interfering like this? Suqianan sneered coldly. "Master, what is a Buddha?" Dewey Master replied. "Before the Tathagata, 720,368 years passed without anyone becoming a Buddha. After the Tathagata, 3,491 years passed without anyone becoming a Buddha." Dewey Master's voice carried a tone of questioning. "The Tathagata is the Buddha. How can you claim everyone can become a Buddha?" Suqianan pondered briefly. "So Buddhism in this world has existed for 3,491 years. But why hasn't there been any thought stream for Mahayana? Perhaps it's because the 9 provinces world reveres strength, valuing realms above all else. Whoever has the biggest fist rules." This stifled the development of thought. In my world, however, where everyone was merely mortal flesh, there were constant clashes of ideas. The environments differ, and their development paths diverged, Suqianan stated. So, in the eyes of the world's Buddhist disciples, the Buddha is the Tathagata, rather than the Tathagata being the Buddha. From my perspective, this idea is utterly ridiculous. His statement was convoluted, and besides the Buddhist monks outside, no one understood it. Dewey Master couldn't help but ask, "What's so ridiculous about it? You must explain it clearly." Suqianan replied disdainfully, "Of course it's ridiculous. Take, for example, the sorcerers of the 4 heavenly swords. Jianzheng is a 1st-grade sorcerer, but a 1st-grade sorcerer is not Jianzheng. This is a consensus, isn't it? But in your Buddhism, the Buddha is the Tathagata. Isn't that absurd and strange? Shouldn't the Buddha represent a supreme fruit position, rather than a single individual?" The monks were momentarily unable to retort, although his words were deeply heretical. After all, the Tathagata was Buddhism's founding patriarch, the sole Buddha, and their object of veneration. Such a revered, godlike figure. Shouldn't he be the one and only Buddha? But Suqianan's reasoning made sense. He continued, "I have a question for the master. What exactly is Buddha? Is it a way to gain power? Or a way of thinking?" Dewey Master remained stern-faced, pondered seriously for a moment, and then replied, "Both." Suqianan firmly stated, "That's why I say, there's a distinction between Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhism." On the 8 trigrams platform of the observation tower, Jianzheng slapped his forehead in frustration, muttering, "This brat dares to say anything. This is bad. The Emperor Yuanjing turned and asked, "Jianzheng, what are you saying?" Jianzheng awkwardly smiled. Your Majesty, Su Qian'an has delivered quite the gift to you. In the plaza, Wei Yuan slowly stood up, his hands clenched into fists beneath his long sleeves. It seemed as though something had occurred to him. Wang Shoufu muttered, impressive. Under the Bodhi tree, Su Qian'an said, the current Buddhist community respects power and is rooted in hierarchy. Every Buddhist practitioner's goal is to achieve a fruit status, whether arhat or bodhisattva. To put it bluntly, it's about self-liberation. As for saving all sentient beings, that comes later. Dewey Master, am I correct? Dewey Master suddenly stopped, putting his hands together, silently confirming. Su Qian'an continued, therefore, respecting power, rooted in hierarchy, treating the Tathagata as the Buddha, I call this Hinayana Buddhism. A monk countered. If this is Hinayana Buddhism, then what is Mahayana Buddhism? Are you saying it's everyone is Buddha? That's absurd. Su Qian'an replied calmly, you find it absurd because you practice Hinayana. Hinayana Buddhism fundamentally still respects hierarchy, focusing on self-interest. But what if it respected the mind instead? Dewey Master put his hands together and recited a Buddhist verse. Respect the mind? Benefactor, please enlighten us. Su Qian'an spoke confidently. You believe there is only one Buddha, that the Buddha is the Tathagata, and people cannot become Buddhas. They can only achieve bodhisattva or arhat status. But remember, was the Tathagata born a Buddha? I believe everyone has Buddha nature, just clouded by the filth of the mundane world. After cultivating and anyone can become a Buddha. Master, see your nature. Realize Buddhahood. Suddenly, a thunderclap echoed in the sky. A faint resonance sounded. The crowd watched in amazement. Dewey Master's entire body radiated golden light, corresponding to the celestial phenomenon. In Buddhism, this was enlightenment, seeing your nature, realizing Buddhahood. Dewey Master, immersed in this wondrous state, was utterly enwrapped. A voice inside him screamed, why is the Tathagata the Buddha? Why can't I be the Buddha? Why can't everyone become a Buddha? Does Buddha really have to be defined by strength alone? Must Buddha only mean the Tathagata? How narrow-minded that is. Only if everyone can become a Buddha can the light of Buddha truly shine across the 9 provinces. This is the true essence of Buddhism. The concept of Mahayana Buddhism emerged. A new school of thought appeared. The other monks did not achieve enlightenment, but they gained their own insights. Some even felt a sudden clarity, as if glimpsing a different kind of Buddhism, a new realm of thought. Wei Yuan said each word slowly. Excellent enlightenment. Truly excellent. Wang Shoufu laughed heartily. Brilliant. Brilliant. Even Emperor Yuanjing stared deeply at Su Qian'an, realizing he had proposed the concept of Mahayana Buddhism. If Dewey Master hadn't achieved enlightenment, that would be fine. But since he has, when he returns to the western regions someday, he will surely propagate Mahayana Buddhism, and that will inevitably lead to a conflict of beliefs between Mahayana and Hinayana. Endless debates will be the least of it. Should a schism arise, the very thought of it, the more Emperor Yuanjing thought about it, the harder it was to remain calm. He burst into laughter, feeling both exhilarated and elated, because Jianzheng was right. Su Qian'an had indeed given him a tremendous gift. In the distance, the great river flowed as if entranced, murmuring to itself, Mahayana Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. I can also become a Buddha. Martial monks can also become Buddhas. Everyone in the world can become a Buddha, bringing salvation to all beings. Jianzheng widened his eyes and looked toward Huaijing. He knew it was significant, but he didn't fully understand it. He could only ask the well-informed Huaijing, what did that servant just say? Huaijing replied, I don't know what he said, but I do know what the consequences will be. Biao Biao blinked his peach blossom eyes. What consequences? Huaijing showed a thoughtful expression. From now on, Buddhism will be divided into Mahayana and Hinayana. At the same time, influenced by the second-grade Arhat Dewey Master, monks in the western regions began to achieve insight, entering a subtle and marvelous state. Of course, this was still leagues away from Dewey Master's enlightenment. Dewey Arhat did not disturb his disciples' realization. Putting his hands together, he loudly declared, a sage once said, in learning, there is no distinction of age. Those who master it first are teachers. This is the ultimate truth. Though Su Benefactor is not of our Buddhist sect, he possesses great Buddhist roots, allowing me to suddenly see the light, elevating my thoughts. This perfectly demonstrates that everyone possesses Buddha nature. Through self-realization, everyone can become a Buddha. Thank you, Su Benefactor, for your guidance, which allowed me to understand Mahayana Buddhism. The third stage is yours to claim victory. In the front rows of the square, a scholarly dressed man stammered, just now, that eminent Buddhist monk seemed to be saying that Su Benefactor should be his teacher. Until now, martial artists had always been looked down upon by other schools. They were often labeled as violent troublemakers, only useful in battle, and at other times merely a source of chaos. They were considered a destabilizing factor in 9 provinces society. But now, a distinguished Buddhist monk, a second-grade Arhat, was saying that a martial artist deserved to be his teacher. For the martial artists listening, this was an exhilarating moment, a long overdue acknowledgement. Gradually, the martial artists fell into a frenzy. The entire martial world of Defying would remember Su Qian'an's name. He was a true warrior. When I return home, I'll spread word of this event far and wide. This trip to the capital was not in vain. I've gained so much knowledge. In a corner, a woman still full of charm turned to her prized student. Rong, I've inquired about him. This Lord Su is a regular at Jiaofengxi. Rong, a bit confused, looked back at her master. What are you trying to say, master? The woman sighed softly. We, the people of the martial world, don't stand on ceremony. Rong, with your looks, being his wife is unlikely. But to be a concubine, that's not a problem. Rong blushed deeply. She wanted to refuse. But the man was just too dazzling. So dazzling that even a woman as confident in her beauty as she couldn't help but feel her heart stir. Su Qian'an continued to press forward, encountering no further obstacles on the way. He walked until he reached the top steps, entering a small square in front of a temple. It was a standalone temple, and it seemed to be the final trial. Dewey Arhat had said that entering the temple and still refusing to convert to Buddhism would mean the Buddhist sect had lost. At that moment, Su Qian'an recalled the 108 moves taught by the courtesans of Jiaofengxi. He used these to cloud his mind and immerse himself in a certain mood. His entire demeanor took on a royal, exclusive quality. He confirmed that he had become an old lecher, then, satisfied, pushed open the temple doors. Inside, upon seeing this, Dewey Arhat pressed his palms together and said, "Entering this temple, even stone can be enlightened." Within the temple, there were two statues. The one on the left was the Vajra statue. Benefactor Su, the mystery of the Vajra Sutra, lies within this statue. If you can comprehend it, you can attain the indestructible Vajra body of Buddhism. Su Qian'an's eyes immediately blazed with excitement. The Vajra Sutra is within the statue. If I can master this protective divine skill, I'll be unrivaled among 6th grade warriors. Moreover, with this divine skill, my final weakness will be resolved. After slashing once, he was utterly drained and tossed the blade aside, lying on the ground and telling his opponent to come assure themselves. Su Qian'an felt a mix of excitement and dread. Jianzhong was terrifying. No wonder he insisted that I represent the 4 heavenly swords in the contest. This must have been part of his plan all along. Outside, when the martial artists heard Dewey Arhat's words, their eyes lit up. They looked up at the statue, wishing they could glue their eyes to it. In truth, Dewey Arhat was painting a rosy picture for Su Qian'an, laying the groundwork to bring him into the Buddhist fold. It wasn't just about recruitment. Su Qian'an was the founder of Great Vehicle Buddhism. Dewey Arhat sought to become the bedrock of Great Vehicle Buddhism. In this way, promoting the ideology of Great Vehicle Buddhism would be easier. Transforming the small vehicle into the Great Vehicle, Su Qian'an's presence was critical. Su Qian'an stared at the statue for a quarter of an hour, not blinking once. The Diamond Sutra is in the statue? What nonsense is this? It's not there. He mocked himself internally. I'm just a crude martial artist without any Buddhist roots. Suddenly, he felt a warm flow in his abdomen. Su Qian'an immediately perked up. Something was wrong. Oh no, I almost forgot I have a cheat code. He took a deep breath, sat down cross-legged, focused his mind, and relaxed. The warm flow rose from his lower abdomen, passed through his middle abdomen, and reached his upper abdomen. Suddenly, between his eyebrows, he felt a release, like a plastic film being pulled open. A tiny spark of energy appeared between his brows, then quickly spread, as if an invisible pin were outlining his body. Within a few breaths, Su Qian'an was covered in brilliant golden light. Suddenly, he himself appeared as a golden statue. Seeing this, the courtiers' faces fell. How did he turn into a golden statue? Did Su Qian'an actually convert to Buddhism? Biao Biao watched Su Qian'an with excitement. His lips trembled uncontrollably. That old bald monk said it. You can only cultivate the indestructible diamond by becoming a monk. Could that scoundrel really be planning to join the monastery? Princess Huiqing shook her head, saying, I'm not sure. Upstairs, Emperor Yuanjing's expression also darkened. He glanced toward Jianzhong and asked, is Su Qian going to fall short at this final step? In the painting scroll, Su Qian's entire body radiated golden light. He suddenly opened his eyes, looked in a direction, and asked, Master Dewey, have I passed the test? I have grasped the indestructible diamond, yet I am still just an ordinary man. As his words fell, the entire capital erupted in excitement. The Buddhist sect had tried to outsmart him and failed. This silver gong truly is a prodigy. In a decade or so, he might even surpass the Duke of the Northern Barons, becoming the greatest warrior in the land. The Jinluo guards' eyes bulged with envy, their hearts filled with bitterness. Wei Yuan chuckled proudly, but also harbored some doubt. Could it be Jianzhang's doing? He quickly dismissed the thought. It doesn't matter. As long as Su Qian continues to excel in martial arts, even occasional confusion is acceptable. Su Qian whispered, Father, after today, you might not be known as an unworthy parent anymore. Second Uncle Su turned his head, puzzled. Why? Su Xinyan grinned.
Because
You raised an elder brother who's a martial arts prodigy. From now on, anyone who practices martial will give you a thumbs up. Second Uncle Su laughed heartily, feeling as if a weight from the past year had lifted. Far away on the rooftop, someone watched with admiration. The indestructible diamond technique. Chuyuan patted a monk's bald head. Keep it steady. When we return, I'll ask Su Ningyan to teach you the indestructible diamond. Then you can progress further along your martial monk's path. Maybe even become a third-grade diamond one day. The conversation between the old monk of obsession and Su Qian was heard clearly by everyone outside. With Chuyuan and Heng Yuan's insight, it wasn't hard to deduce. The next rank after the 8th-grade martial monk is the 3rd-grade diamond. Amid cheers and applause, the old woman suddenly spoke up. Don't celebrate too soon. There's still another statue. At that moment, Dewey Arhat chanted a Buddhist verse, his voice filled with a faint smile, echoing throughout. This challenge is called the Ashura's Heart Inquiry. It comes from a Buddhist legend. According to the story, when the Buddha founded the sect in the western regions, the area was plagued by a tribe known as the Ashura. The Ashura tribe was fierce, warlike, and bloodthirsty. To seize territory, they indiscriminately slaughtered Buddhist monks. When the Buddha learned of this, he personally went to the Ashura tribe's land and meditated for 3 days and nights. He endured their attacks and killings, never retaliating. The savage Ashura immediately began hacking and slashing, one cut after another. His flesh was split open, blood flowed freely, but from within the flesh came a resounding chime. After 2 strikes, golden light shone from the wound. After 3,600 strikes, the Buddha shed his mortal flesh, revealing his golden body. The Ashura tribe, after 3 days and nights of hacking, gained insight into themselves, achieved enlightenment, and thereafter gave up killing to become Buddhists. At that moment, the eyes of the golden statue in the temple, which had been shut, suddenly opened. The moment the statue's eyes opened, a majestic aura of Buddhist power, as overwhelming as an avalanche, flooded the area with indescribable force. Su Qian was consumed by it. He saw endless, boundless Buddha light. This Buddha light did not bring peace, but rather felt overbearing and unreasonable. The next moment, he placed one hand on his blade, and amidst the astonished gazes of everyone, drew his black gold long blade. But instead of striking the statue, his other hand reached for the wig on his head. Was he about to shave his own head? At that moment, Su Qian snapped out of it. Oh crap, he couldn't remove it. He didn't have hair. If he took off the wig, if my big bald head is exposed to the view of thousands of people. At this moment, Dewey Arhat's cheerful voice rang out. Just hearing his voice, you could sense his overwhelming joy. Having come to Defying was truly the most correct decision of my life. With one moment of enlightenment, I grasped the great vehicle Buddhism and recognized a natural-born wise child of Buddhism. Midba. Blessed be Buddhism. The crowd was enraged, but instead of lashing out, they focused intently on watching Su Qian. They held their breath in anticipation, because anyone could see that Su Qian was struggling, fighting against the Ashura Heart Inquiry. The elderly woman was nervously clasping her delicate hands, tightly wringing the hem of her skirt. Hold on, she whispered. On the rooftop of the concerned heart building, the emperor suddenly turned. Jianzheng, he exclaimed urgently, I will not allow him to renounce the world and join the Buddhist order. No matter what it takes, you must stop him. Jianzheng replied with a bow. Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven. A mere silver gong is unworthy of concern. The emperor bellowed, No, Defying has finally produced a prodigy of this caliber. How can we let Buddhism take him away? You must stop him, even if it means revealing the heavenly secrets. Jianzheng quietly reassured him. Your Majesty, rest assured. The old man's hands clasped the wine cup, lightly pressing as if gathering force. The surface of the wine remained calm, reflecting the sun, moon, and mountains. But then Jianzheng suddenly paused, gazing into the distance. It was the direction of Cloud Road Academy. He frowned slightly, murmuring to himself, Someone has made a move. The young woman shrieked in excitement. You servant, hold on. At that moment, Dewey Arhat frowned slightly and said, Only by taking refuge in Buddhism can one transcend the sea of suffering. Immortality. Why are you so obstinately unwilling to see reason? Inside the temple within the Buddha realm, Su Qian briefly regained his self-will. He resisted joining the Buddhist order, resisted the ideas being instilled in him, but his resistance seemed to provoke the Buddha statue's wrath. The mist surrounding the Buddha mountain trembled violently. A colossal spiritual statue condensed from the heavens to the earth. The towering statue slowly lowered its gaze toward the temple, then gradually extended a massive Buddha hand downward. It pressed downward. Inside the temple, Su Qian's shoulders suddenly felt an immense weight. It was as if a mountain were pressing down on him. The overwhelming pressure forced him to his knees. Su Qian grew tense, knowing he could not yield. He felt a strong premonition. If he knelt, there would be no turning back. He would become another version of himself. a Su Qian who revered and worshipped Buddha. Outside the temple, the enormous Buddha hand of the statue pressed downward again. Su Qian's bones, his spine seemed to protrude slightly, as though it might pierce through his flesh at any moment. He bowed his head even lower, unable to straighten it, but he never bent his knees. Head lowered, Su Qian's face turned bright red, his eyes bloodshot, his expression twisted. He opened his mouth and stubbornly uttered, "I will not kneel. Even if I must believe, it must be of my own free will. No faith will tame me." At Cloud Road Academy's Apex Hall, the redwood box hanging over the shook violently. This time the trembling was extremely intense, as if something inside was desperate to break free. Li Mubai's eyes widened in disbelief. Someone is channeling the power of the masses again. The dean, Zhao Shou, furrowed his brows. He clasped his hands and said, "Predecessor, please be at peace." But the redwood box shook even more violently. 3 towering Confucian scholars immediately summoned their righteous energy, joining the dean to suppress the redwood box. They clasped their hands and said, "Predecessor, please be at peace." With a loud bang, the redwood box exploded, sending out a burst of clear light. A beam of light shot forth. It pierced the roof of the hall and soared into the sky. Dean Zhao Shou chased after it. His gaze followed the beam. It crossed the mountains, disappearing beyond the horizon. That was the direction of the capital. In the square, Master Du Yi clasped his hands together and intoned, "Amitabha Buddha." I did not expect Benefactor Su's conviction to be so profound. Surely, once you join the Buddhist order, your heart will become even more clear. Princess Huiqing stepped forward. Liang Peng shouted, "Don't kneel to these bald donkeys." From one of the viewing pavilions, an elderly man in plain clothes stood up. In a trembling voice, he shouted, "Young man, your heroic spirit and valor shine brighter than the stars. With loyalty and righteousness, live and die by your code. Your word carries the weight of 1,000 pounds. Such words can only come from the noble-hearted. Stand straight. Do not kneel." Su Pingji cried out, "Ning Yin, stand up. Don't kneel." Sitting in Wei Yuan's lap, the little bean sprout suddenly blurted out, "Big brother." Wei Yuan patted the child's head, helping him finish the next line, "Don't kneel." Lord Wang stood up. In a clear voice, he declared, "A martial artist of Defying, we do not kneel." And that set off the spark. The onlookers erupted, shouting, "Do not kneel." More and more voices joined in the chant, "Do not kneel." Su Qian seemed to feel the will of the people. A pure, unified thought surged into his spiritual sea. This thought was vast and unyielding, conveying one message, "Do not kneel." In an instant, Su Qian's eyes shone with an unprecedented brilliance. Like a penitent wanderer in darkness, he finally saw the light of dawn. He straightened his spine and shouted out the hearts of tens of thousands in the capital, "I, Su Qian, will not kneel." At the same moment, a beam of clear light burst through the sky. With a thunderous roar, it crashed into the Buddhist scriptures. A beam of light shot forth. The towering spiritual form in the Buddha's mirror seemed to sense the beam as it struck. In that instant, the beam dissolved the image. It then turned sharply and flew toward Su Qian. Su Qian instinctively raised his arm. The light landed in his hand. It was a plain, black carving knife. Su Qian had never felt more confident. He declared, "If all beings can become Buddhas, why should I kneel before you?" As he said this, he calmly stabbed with the knife. With a crack, the Buddha statue's surface was instantly covered with cracks. Then it shattered. At the same time, the golden waves split with fissures. And then, with a boom, they turned to dust. The Buddha mirror vanished. 2 figures fell out. One was the unconscious Jing Si. The other was Su Qian, standing. Su Qian slowly looked around. Then he felt his eyelids grow heavy. He quickly pressed down on his wig. And then fainted on the spot. Fainting in front of a crowd wasn't the issue. But the wig must not fall. That was his dignity. Atop the stargazing tower, Jian Zheng's expression was no longer composed. He stared at the knife in Su Qian's hand, murmuring, "So, you chose him too?" At the top of the brothel, Emperor Yuanjing stood with his hands behind his back. He looked to the heavens and laughed heartily. What a refusal! How many years has it been? How many years has the capital gone without producing such an outstanding youth? Biao Biao let out a piercing shriek, stamping her feet in excitement. He won. The dog servant won. He's mine. He's mine. Princess Huiqing gazed at the unconscious Su Qian, her eyes filled with fascination. At this moment, she recalled all of Su Qian's past exploits. From his first case in the tax office, Su Qian had already shown potential. He covertly orchestrated the downfall. This eliminated a hidden threat completely. Later, he joined the Night Watcher organization, fought off a silver badge practitioner, and survived imprisonment. When tasked with investigating the Sangbo case, he nearly single-handedly uncovered the truth behind the Yunzhou conspiracy. Even when faced with 400 rebels, he ultimately prevailed in Beijing. During these times, he frequently amazed scholars and officials alike with his poetic talent. bringing inspiration and confidence to Defying. And now, taking the place of the 4 skyward swords against the Buddhist monks, with just 2 strikes of his blade, he restored faith among the citizens of the capital. In one debate, he transformed the old monks' long-held doubts under the Bodhi tree, leading a second-rank Arhat to enlightenment. He revealed the concept of the greater path. Then, a divine light from the heavens descended, shattering the Dharma image and the Arhat's treasured artifact. Princess Huiqing had never encountered such a remarkable man. Never. As the citizens of the capital roared in excitement and shouted with exhilaration, the protagonist, Su Qian, went unnoticed. Su Erlang quietly stepped forward to support his elder brother. In his heart he thought, in the end, I bear it all alone. He carried Su Qian over to the other night watchers, his gaze falling on the carving knife tightly clutched in Su Qian's hand. What is this? It seems to be a carving knife. Where did he get it? Su Erlang felt a pang of envy. When no one's looking, I'll sneak it from my elder brother, he thought. The Arhat of misfortune stood despondently in place, while a monk from Jinsheng pleaded, Master Uncle, Su Qian is heaven's gift to Buddhism. He is the founder of the greater path. You must take him back to the western regions. The Arhat of misfortune gazed at the 2 receding figures, pondering for a long time. Finally, he sighed deeply and said, Forget it. Forget it. Perhaps the time isn't right. The monk from Jinsheng, dissatisfied, opened his mouth, but it seemed he thought of something else. Ultimately, they chose silence. Meanwhile, at the Hanlin Academy, a branch under the Inner Cabinet, was responsible for drafting state decrees, composing histories, preparing royal proclamations, teaching members of the royal family, and serving as examiners for the imperial civil service exams. Among the most prestigious positions in the court, 3 stood out: the censorate's inspectors, the 6 ministries' vice-directors, and the Hanlin Academy officials. In terms of rank, the Hanlin Academy was at the top, revered as a nursery for future prime ministers. Throughout Defying's history, every Grand Secretary had come from the Hanlin Academy. Only those who had served in the Academy could be considered for the Inner Cabinet, eventually becoming senior Grand Secretaries, and in some cases, ascending to the post of Grand Secretary. At this moment, an attending eunuch stood in the hall of the Hanlin Academy, scolding the scholars. This victory in the debate, was it not the result of His Majesty's wise leadership? Was it not due to the court's efforts in nurturing Su Qian? The eunuch tossed a draft to the floor. Look at what you've written. All of you who came from prestigious academies can't even write proper history. The eunuch demanded a rewrite, causing the scholars' faces to pale. There was no doubt that this debate would go down in history, but how it was recorded mattered greatly. Events that glorified the state were always documented positively, symbolizing honor and grandeur. It was clear the reigning emperor. A young scholar then spoke up. The credit for this debate, it lies with Su Qian's efforts, not His Majesty. As Hanlin Academy scholars, our duty is not only to record for the court, but also for the truth of posterity. The eunuch sneered. How did you even get into the Hanlin Academy? It was His Majesty's grace. Getting into the Inner Cabinet is only a matter of time. When the sun and moon shine on all, bright prospects ahead. If you offend His Majesty, you'll be reassigned to the provinces. Those bright prospects, gone in an instant, not even the faintest starlight would remain. His Majesty's will is clear. Keep the length of the passage the same, but emphasize the process of selecting talents. As for Su Yinluo's accolades, he's still young. There will be plenty of opportunities later. Understood, gentlemen? As soon as he finished speaking, the young compiler grabbed a volume and hurled it. It hit the eunuch square in the face. The eunuch staggered back, stunned. Dare strike me? He roared. The compiler pointed an accusing finger. You bet I dare. When the Western region's delegation arrived, they first caused trouble in the southern city. Then they questioned the court's integrity, but Su Qian turned the tide, defeating the Buddhist faction's aura of invincibility. Without him, the court would have lost all face. Why can't we sing his praises? Why cut down on the recognition he deserves? He's a young hero, and I deeply respect him. If he were a scholar, I'd make him my teacher. Other scholars in the room were inspired. They too grabbed whatever they could, inkstones, scrolls, and started throwing. Get out! Get out! This isn't a place for lackeys like you. Over at Lingbao Temple, a woman in ornate robes entered the inner courtyard. In a gentle voice, she said, Master, I didn't see you at the debate today. Did you hear about the debate? Seated on a mat was a woman with a celestial beauty. Her name, Luo Yuqing. With a serene expression, she replied, I'm not interested in such matters. The woman laughed. Then you missed quite a show. Today's debate was incredible, more entertaining than a stage performance. I'll tell you about it. She was chattering away. She described the duel vividly to Luo Yuheng. Luo Yuheng frowned and asked, Did you say he broke the 8-section formation with one strike? Mulanji nodded and said, Yes, that's amazing. What's the matter? Luo Yuheng mused for a moment. Perhaps heaven is helping him, even rallying the power of all beings for him. Mulanji marveled. Even though I still don't understand. What's so impressive about Mahayana Buddhism? Just hearing about it sounds incredible. A look of astonishment flashed in Luo Yuheng's eyes. Mahayana Buddhism? It actually has such profound power? Mulanji's eyes sparkled, and she kept chattering on. But that's nothing. The most exciting part was the fourth round. Luo Yuheng joked. Oh, really? Have you noticed something? You used to complain about being bored when you visited me, always wanting to go out and play. But now you never say you're bored anymore. Not only that, but almost everything you tell me somehow relates back to Suqian. Mulanji was taken aback. She stared at Luo Yuheng for a moment, then reigned in her lively demeanor, once again becoming a refined and dignified lady, with a hint of aloofness. Her tone was calm. What are you implying? Luo Yuheng smiled and shook his head. I just wanted to remind you that you have a husband. Your husband is Prince Huai, a third-ranking official. Although he guards the frontier and isn't in the capital is full of his confidants and informants. You know that better than anyone. You should avoid getting too entangled with Suqian. Otherwise, it would harm him. Mulanji said proudly, how could I be involved with a dandy who spends all day in the brothel? Are you mocking me? Luo Yuheng said in a low voice. That's it. Done. Actually, even if you don't say it, I know what happens next. It's nothing more than the Dharma form shattering for no reason, or Jianzheng making a move. Mulanji quickly said, no, it was a beam of pure light that descended from the sky, breaking the golden Dharma form. It destroyed the Buddhist realm. I was close by at the time, and saw it clearly. It was a carving knife that fell next to Hunger, like a bolt of lightning. His hand trembled, spilling warm tea. His elegant face froze in place. The carving knife isn't Jianzheng's. Jianzheng couldn't control a Confucian carving knife. Luo Yuheng mused. Where is the carving knife? What happened afterward? Tell me in detail. Mulanji asked curiously. What's wrong with you? Luo Yuheng leaned forward, grabbing her hand. He pressed her urgently. Tell me quickly. Mulanji quickly replied. The carving knife shattered the Dharma form. Luo Yuheng stared at her intensely. After the carving knife broke the Dharma form, did it disappear, or stay at the scene? Did Suqian touch the carving knife? Mulanji became unusually excited, lifting her right arm and gesturing forward. Yes. He slashed the temple's Dharma form with one cut, just like this. As her words fell, the beautiful national teacher froze. Her gaze turned vacant, like a jade statue of a beauty. Beautiful, yes, but devoid of vitality. At midnight, in a small courtyard on the outskirts of the city, a mysterious light descended, unseen by ordinary people. Landing in the courtyard, inside a room, an elderly Taoist with graying hair awoke abruptly. Hansheng sat up, helpless. Junior sister, even your young spirit is unsheathed. You're in such a rush. Is something urgent happening? Luo Yuheng didn't waste words, and asked bluntly. The Confucian carving knife appeared? Taoist Golden Lotus hesitated briefly, then gave a slight nod. Luo Yuheng's sharp gaze burned. Tell me, who exactly is Suqian? Taoist Golden Lotus pondered his reply, seeming uncertain. Just an ordinary person, I think. Luo Yuheng sneered. An ordinary person can use a Confucian carving knife? Taoist Golden Lotus sighed and said, when I first encountered him, I saw that he was someone with great merit. So I gave him a fragment of the emperor's book, using his merit to evade Zijin's pursuit. Afterward, I investigated his background, and found it rather strange. Whether it was Li Miaojin, Chu Yuanjin, or anyone else, when I gave them fragments of the emperor's book, they had already attained enlightenment. Suqian, however, had an ordinary family, and led a life that was completely unremarkable. Where would his merit come from? Merit is usually earned through doing good deeds, or ancestral blessings. He has neither. Then one day, something happened that made me realize his case was unusual. Once, in the emperor's book fragment, he confided. He said he kept finding silver every day. I wanted to know why. Hearing this, Luo Yuheng couldn't help but say, that's not merit. Taoist Golden Lotus stared at him, his gaze deep and bright. Word by word, he said, no, this is a 7th month, the 7 months of heaven. Although he had speculated, he was still shocked to hear Taoist Golden Lotus confirm it. Luo Yuheng's pupils constricted sharply. In the west courtyard of the Su residence, Suqian slowly woke up. He felt pain all over his body, especially in his shoulders. He rolled his eyes and looked around, noticing a round table in the outer hall, where an elderly man, as steady as a mountain, was seated. Suqian abruptly sat up in shock. At the same time, he wondered, who is this? The old man stood up, smiling. You're awake? I am Zhao Shou, the headmaster of Cloud Deer Academy. Suqian had heard Susi talk about it. The headmaster of the academy was a 3rd-grade Confucian master. He smiled politely. So it's the headmaster. The headmaster carries an extraordinary aura, refined and reserved, truly a revered elder. But why is the headmaster in my room? Zhao Shou did not answer. His gaze fell on Suqian's right hand. Only then did Suqian realize he was still holding the carving knife. He was momentarily stunned. His mind began to guess. This carving knife belonged to Cloud Deer Academy. That made sense. apart from Cloud Deer Academy? What other school could contain such noble righteousness? Zhao Shou smiled and said, this carving knife is our academy's treasure. You've been holding it the whole time, and no one could take it from you. I had no choice but to wait here for you to wake up, so I could ask you some questions. After he finished speaking, he glanced again at the ancient carving knife. His expression seemed to say, still holding on to it? Young man, you're really clueless. Su Qian thought for a moment. This kind of treasure couldn't be kept by him, so he handed it over decisively. But Zhao Shou didn't take it. Instead, he gestured toward the table in front of him. Su Qian was completely confused, thinking, what's this old man up to? Then he seemed to realize something. With a clang, he dropped the carving knife onto the table. Zhao Shou raised an eyebrow and quickly bowed to the carving knife 3 times. Only then did he take out a wooden box from his sleeve, putting the carving knife inside. He smiled and said, Sir Su, do you know the origins of this carving knife? Su Qian's heart stirred. He boldly guessed it belonged to the ancient sages. Zhao Shou shook his head and said, no, this is the carving knife of the sage. Su Qian was so shocked his mouth dropped open. His throat seemed blocked, leaving him speechless. The carving knife of the sage. That sage? The sage beyond the ranks? Can I hold the carving knife for a while longer? I haven't taken a picture for my friends yet. Zhao Shou continued. Since the sage's passing, this carving knife has been silent for over 1,000 years. Even though later generations could use it, they couldn't awaken it. Yet today it emerged from its dormancy. To assist you, Sir Su. He then focused his gaze on Su Qian, saying, there are some things I must tell you directly, Sir Su. Su Qian's heart sank. Having a sense of foreboding, he rose from his bed and bowed respectfully. Please advise me, headmaster. In a small courtyard outside the city, Luo Yuheng shook his head repeatedly. His long, delicate brows furrowed. That's impossible, he retorted. I've interacted with him many times. If he carried the auspicious aura, I would have sensed it. How could I, or even Runzong, fail to notice? Taoist Golden Lotus countered. What if the heavenly secrets are concealed? Now if you look at Su Qian again, you won't detect anything unusual either. Luo Yuheng took a deep breath. His sharp gaze felt like a blade. You're saying Jianzheng? Golden Lotus Taoist smiled faintly. Haven't you investigated Su Qian? He's just a minor silver gong. His ancestors never produced any extraordinary figures. How could he bear the weight of such profound fortune? Luo Yuheng thought deeply for a long time. Suddenly he said, if a sorcerer concealed the heavenly secrets, then by logic, you shouldn't be able to see his merit. Golden Lotus Taoist sighed. If he doesn't want others to know, then no one can ever find out. Golden Lotus Taoist said calmly, what you thought of, I've already considered. Recently, I noticed his merit disappeared, so I went to check. I found that Jianzheng had concealed the heavenly secrets, hiding his uniqueness. I realized then that this was no ordinary matter. Su Qian's life hides great secrets. That day, after I left the Su residence, I somehow found myself at the Bagua platform of Stargazing Tower, where I met Jianzheng. Luo Yuheng narrowed his beautiful eyes. What did he say? Golden Lotus Taoist replied. He said, well, water doesn't mix with river water. The figure of the floating Buddha has a determined beauty. Since Su held onto his eagle-teeth molars and abandoned his path, the dynasty's fate has plummeted. Sure enough, it's connected to the Tianjian. Golden Lotus Taoist frowned. What do you mean? Luo Yuheng said, years ago, Wei Yuan once came to command the officials. He pointed at my nose and scolded me as a femme fatale. He said that over the past 20 years, as His Majesty pursued the Tao, the nation of Defying has gradually declined. Taxes and grain levies from the provinces are frequently uncollected. People are suffering, and corrupt officials run rampant. He placed all the blame on me, saying I bewitched His Majesty into pursuing the Tao for my own cultivation, causing him to neglect governance. Golden Lotus Taoist muttered under his breath, isn't that true? The beautiful national teacher continued. I suddenly realized that the dynasty's fortune was draining away. It was like cutting flesh with a dull knife, difficult to detect. If it weren't for Wei Yuan's talent in governing the country, his sharp insight, and the severe scolding he gave me, I might have taken several more years to notice the clues. Golden Lotus Taoist reminded her, say no more. This is Jianzheng's territory. For all we know, he's been listening to everything we're saying. Luo Yuheng curled her lips. She said confidently, it won't happen. As long as I'm here, he can't hear. Golden Lotus Taoist nervously muttering to himself, it's not a matter of whether he can hear us. I just don't want to be involved in this mess. Suddenly, he thought of something, and asked tentatively, what if, just hypothetically, what if Su Qian really did have deepened auspicious fortune? Would you consider dual cultivation with him? Luo Yuheng's expression turned thoughtful. Her mind was in chaos, but her initial reaction was not one of rejection. Meanwhile, back at the Su residence, Zhao Shou posed 2 questions. Do you know why the sage's carving knife emerged? Why, after the sage's time, could later generations only use it, but never awaken it? Su Qian shook his head, indicating he didn't know. He thought, I'm just a crude warrior, headmaster. Zhao Shou didn't keep him guessing. He explained. It's because of insufficient fortune. This carving knife was used by the sage. The sage used it to carve the spring and autumn annals, the rites and music, and so forth. Only those who gather great earthly fortune can use it. The headmaster's words finally resolved the long-standing puzzle in Su Qian's mind. He realized that his strange luck was actually a form of fortune. Finding silver every day, wasn't that a sign of someone favored by fortune? Su Qian felt a heavy weight in his chest. As my cultivation grows, I find even more silver. Its fortune steadily increasing. Rather than calling it an increase, it's more like it's slowly reviving inside me. Zhao Shou said kindly, this fortune is mysterious and subtle, yet it truly exists. In the 9 provinces, there are 3 sources of fortune-related matters. First, Confucianism. Second, sorcerers. And third, worldly emperors. And these worldly emperors aren't limited to Defying. The Wuxian sect and the Buddhist monks of the western regions also have their own systems. But the former's tribes are scattered, and the latter's population is sparse, so they can't gather sufficient fortune. Su Qian's expression darkened. So there are 3 options. Confucianism likely has nothing to do with me. Otherwise the headmaster wouldn't have skirted the issue. And if I'm a member of the royal family, then I'm in trouble. Linen and Huiqing would be my sisters or cousins. But Linglong's attitude suggests that I'm unlikely to be royalty. Otherwise, he should be fawning over the legitimate and proper Huiqing. Besides, I've never seen Linen and Huiqing picking up silver coins every day. Now my relationship and things are going well with Huiqing too. If I keep up my efforts, maybe one day I'll be ennobled as a count. Then I might have a chance to marry a princess. No matter what, they must not have any blood ties to the royal family. Considering the past attitudes and behavior of the treacherous government, I suspect this matter is likely related to the Directorate of Astronomy. No, it definitely. Zhao Shoujian seems to have figured something out, and he chuckled, asking if there were any more questions. Su Qian was immediately stumped. What could I possibly want to ask? Instead, I should just trouble the dean to say one thing to me. Su Qian's Daochan is at his waist. Unfortunately, he could only think this in his heart. In reality, he could only obediently shake his head and say no. Thank you, Dean, for clarifying. Zhao nodded and said, the Emperor's eunuch has been waiting outside for a while. Let him in. His Majesty has something to ask. In a small courtyard outside the city, Taoist Jinlian smiled and said, why? If that's the case, once the flames are subdued indoors, reaching the first rank is just around the corner. Isn't that a tremendous cause for celebration? Taoist Jinlian mentally added. And with Luo Yuheng snorted softly. Even if Su Qian's energy grows deeper, is he stronger than the vision of the earth? Is he stronger than the future Chu Jun? Moreover, even if I dual cultivate with him, the treacherous government will agree? Her question hit the mark, leaving Taoist Jinlian unable to refute. The Taoist thought for a moment, and then asked, does junior sister mind having a Tao companion? Luo Yuheng responded coldly, what do you mean by that? Seeing the female national master glaring, he smiled and said, with his deepening energy, and the fact that he practices martial arts, Su Qian's future achievements will be extremely high. If you want to dual cultivate with him, it's not a one-day affair. Why not cultivate together first and then develop feelings? In your lineage of human sect, no matter what, you'll have to bear offspring in the future. With your temperament, after dual cultivating with someone, can you still marry someone else? Luo Yuheng scoffed indifferently. An earthly immortal has limitless lifespan. Why would I need offspring? Taoist Jinlian smiled but said nothing. Even though earthly immortals roam freely through the heavens and the earth, their lifespans as long as the heavens, they may still encounter unforeseen events. Thus, a lineage must be passed down. But although the human sect junior sister is remarkable, she is ultimately still a woman. What's more, this isn't the heartless path of the celestial sect. At times, there's a bit of moodiness. Taoist Jinlian said with a smile. It's better to step back early. This way, the history books might write more favorably about you. Luo Yuheng sneered and said, history books always blame women for disasters. They blame them for ruining nations, but they never point out the men's faults in these affairs. Those spineless writers dare not anger the emperor, so they pin all the blame on women. It's truly laughable. Emperor Yuanjing cultivated the Tao, seeking longevity. He wanted to reign as a mortal emperor for 9 generations. Even without the human sect, he would have pursued cultivation. What does that have to do with me? Wei Yuan called me a temptress, deceiving the emperor. But over the years, I've often told Emperor Yuanjing that elixirs are no longer effective. Yet he continues to make large elixirs, searching for smaller ones. He never listens to my advice. So where does this talk of tempting the emperor come from? Taoist Jinlian agreed, nodding at Luo Yuheng's words. But then he commented, junior sister, you have a point. However, your human sect borrowed the emperor's Taoist resonance to suppress the flames. Though it was a last resort, it did assist Emperor Yuanjing's cultivation. Inevitably, you will be blamed. Luo Yuheng stared at him for several seconds, and then said, are you joking with me? With that, she stood up and took her leave. As she reached the threshold, she suddenly remembered the end of Yuanjing's 36th year. The remnant soul of the celestial sect's Taoist master drifted into the capital, no longer focused on cultivation. He spent all day inhabiting a cat, living joyfully among them. I'll have to include that in the human sect's chronicle, she mused. The great Luo Yuheng, departing like a wisp of ghostly light. Junior sister, let's discuss this, alright? But Luo Yuheng had no intention of negotiating with him. She left, leaving behind a trail of starlight. Taoist Jinlian muttered helplessly, what a petty, vengeful woman. Meanwhile, at the Su residence, Su Qian left his room and passed through the inner hall. Su Lingyue exclaimed happily, big brother, you're awake. Su Qian smiled and nodded, saying that he was feeling fine. Then he turned to Chu Kaiwei and asked, Miss Kaiwei, why are you here? Was it my dashing looks that drew you over? Chu Kaiwei quickly held up a tray of pastries and replied, I'm here to deliver a message from my master. She beckoned to Su Qian, saying, come over here. In a hushed tone, she said, Master said, you should ask the emperor for an iron certificate. It took Su Qian a few seconds to process this. What's an iron certificate? The formal name is the Iron Inscription Certificate, commonly known as the Imperial Pardon Token. What would I need that for? Why not exchange it for a few thousand taels of gold, and then get a promotion and a noble title? That's better. Meanwhile, Su Lingyue, seeing the two of them talking closely, puffed her cheeks and beckoned to Su Lingyin, telling her to go play with Sister Kaiwei. The little girl let out a cry, raced over on her short legs to Chu Kaiwei, and bumped into her behind. Sister Kaiwei, let's play. Seeing this, Su Qian could only head to the front hall. There, he told Zhao Shou about it, and observed his reaction. The dean told me to request an iron certificate from the emperor. What does that mean? Zhao Shou nodded slowly and said, that's right. The Iron Inscription Certificate grants immunity from all capital punishment, except treason. After using it, the execution is nullified, and no further punishment is allowed, only awaiting its terms. Su Qian's expression froze. Wait, what does the nullification of capital punishment part mean? However, to maintain his dignity, he pretended to understand and said, I see. So this is what the Iron Inscription Certificate means. He thought to himself, it wouldn't hurt to get an Imperial Pardon Token. Since Director Jin specifically sent Chu Kaiwei to remind me, there must be a reason. Besides, as the heir to the Yen lineage, with many enemies, it would be another layer of protection. As they spoke, Su Qian and Zhao Shou walked side by side into the outer hall. Uncle Su's ears twitched, glancing back. Ning Yin is awake. Su Erlang quickly greeting the dean. Uncle Su introduced him. This is Director Jian's eunuch Chen. Eunuch Chen's face immediately lit up with a smile. Viscount, how is your health? If you need to recuperate, just let me know, and I'll ensure everything you need is sent from the palace. Su Qian responded indifferently. Thank you for your concern, Eunuch Chen. I'm fine. Eunuch Chen warmly smiled. That's great. I've come on behalf of His Majesty to visit you. You've done tremendous service for the court, and His Majesty will certainly reward you richly. Su Qian sincerely replied. This is all thanks to His Majesty's trust. He gave me this opportunity. As the saying goes, you nurture an army for 1,000 days, to use it in a single moment. It is the court's training that allowed me to contribute today. So please convey this honestly to His Majesty. I don't dare to claim credit. I humbly request His Majesty to grant me the Iron Inscription Certificate. Hearing this, Su Erlang thought to himself, Big Brother is quite self-aware. The Iron Inscription Certificate's value is far greater than mere gold or silver. Gold and silver can only allow my brother to be more carefree when visiting brothels, and silk garments will only add more luxurious clothing for mother and sister. But all of that is trivial. Uncle Su, however, had one thought, honor. Throughout history, only distinguished meritorious officials were granted the Iron Inscription Certificate. Eunuch Chun, with a smiling expression, said, I'll make sure to relay your words to His Majesty. By the way, His Majesty is curious about a few things. He sent me to ask a couple of questions. Su Qian maintained a calm expression and said, please ask, Eunuch Chun. Eunuch Chen's face still bore a smile, but his eyes never left Su Qian. During the duel, you struck twice with your saber, astonishing the capital. However, those 2 strikes seem to exceed your limits. His Majesty is curious as to how you managed it. Su Qian gave a succinct response. I'm ashamed to say, it was thanks to the power granted by He didn't go into detail, because it fit Jianjing's persona better. Explaining too much would seem suspicious. Besides, he wasn't worried about Yuanjing seeking verification from Jianzheng. There was an understanding. Jianzheng was cunning enough to cover for him. Eunuch Qian nodded slowly, unsurprised. He then asked about the Confucian carving knife. Zhao Shou quickly interjected with a laugh. Yunlu Academy wiped out Buddhism 400 years ago, and it can do so again today. Su Qian immediately understood, and promptly said, thank you for your assistance, Dean. Eunuch Chun glanced at the Dean, Zhao Shou, and said respectfully, so it was the Academy's doing. I suppose it could be considered a violation of the rules. But then again, Buddhism itself isn't exactly pure. Master Huajing formally entered the court, and the monks issued a reminder. They reconsidered their views, dismissing the corrupted arhat, and personally debated Buddhist teachings with Su Qian, so the Buddhist sect conceded straightforwardly without further resistance. However, they wouldn't let go of the carving knife issue. Eunuch Chun rose to leave, saying, "I understand. Then I won't disturb your rest any further." Su Qian politely escorted him to the door. He watched him walk away before finally exhaling in relief. Meanwhile, in the palace, Emperor Yuanjing had just taken an elixir and was meditating to refine his energy. Hearing faint footsteps, he didn't open his eyes, but calmly asked, "What is it, old eunuch?" The old eunuch whispered. The servant sent to the Hanlin Academy returned, saying that those scholars refused to amend the text, and even beat him up. Yuanjing snorted coldly. "Those fools. Forget it. Forget it. Take your time and deal with it." The old eunuch added, "There's one more matter. Su Inluo has awakened." Eunuch Chun from Jinjing's side brought word back. Su Inluo is asking for an iron inscription certificate. Yuanjing's expression changed slightly. He doesn't want titles or promotions. He doesn't want gold or silver. He just wants an iron inscription certificate. The old eunuch chuckled softly. It seems Su Qian is quite clear-headed. He understands that His Majesty values capable individuals. It's a reward for merit, not for arrogance. If he had asked for a higher rank, it would have caused complications for your Majesty. Yuanjing immediately stopped hesitating. Chen Sheng, this young man's insight, is much sharper than those bookworms in the Hanlin Academy. If he wants the iron inscription certificate, grant it to him. Yuanjing agreed so readily, because the old eunuch was right. In times of peace, rapid title advancements were extremely rare, something seen only in wartime. It's easy to gain an official position, but achieving a noble After pondering for a moment, Yuanjing concluded his meditation. He felt unsettled about the carving knife's appearance, realizing it was due to Zhao Shou's assistance. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. Prepare the palanquin to Lingbao Temple, ordered, and soon met with Luo Yuheng. Yuanjing rambled on. "National Master, this duel has greatly bolstered the prestige of our nation. I believe it won't be long before the southern and northern barbarians, as well as the witch god cult, will hear of it. The fact that Su Luo appeared in the duel will provoke suspicion and fear among them. It's a great boost to our nation's reputation, far more effective than if Yang Qianhuan had represented us." However, when he finished speaking, the beautiful national master didn't reply. He had to call her name several times. Luo Yuheng finally came to her senses, her previously vacant gaze becoming lively again. "What was your Majesty saying?" Yuanjing sat upright, observing the alluring national master closely. "National Master, your mind seems elsewhere. If there's something on your mind, feel free to say it. I will definitely help you resolve it." As the human sect's second-grade Taoist master, Emperor Yuanjing had rarely seen Luo Yuheng so burdened. "Is the struggle between heaven and man troubling you? Why won't this woman agree to dual cultivation with me? My quest for longevity is stuck here." As these thoughts crossed his mind, he saw Luo Yuheng shake her head, and heard her say, "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. I'm fine." Yuanjing nodded and didn't press further. "National Master, I heard that during the duel, the Yunlu Academy's carving knife appeared. I know that it's a relic of the sage, treasure of the Academy. Could there be more to this matter?" Luo Yuheng asked back. "Why would Your Majesty have such doubts? The sage's carving knife is not something ordinary people can wield. Even Zhao Shou, a third-grade official, might struggle with it, let alone Su Qian." Luo Yuheng replied indifferently. "Zhao Shou may be third grade, but there are also 3 fourth-grade gentlemen in the working together. They can easily wield the knife. Moreover, Confucianism and Buddhism have long been at odds. The Academy led the effort to eradicate Buddhism back then. That the Yunlu Academy intervened, but not unreasonable." Yuanjing felt reassured and exhaled lightly. "So that's how it is. I trust the national master's judgment." Luo Yuheng responded briefly. She added, "It's getting late. I won't see Your Majesty out." Yuanjing, startled, thought to himself, "She's sending me away already?" Meanwhile, after escorting the eunuch from Jinjing's side, Su Qian returned to the inner hall, only to be called into the study by Su Erlang. Su Qian glanced at his younger brother and muttered, "What's going on?" Su Xianyan looked rather odd, but not worried, so it didn't seem urgent. Su Qian concluded it wasn't pressing, and casually said, "Erlang, a man shouldn't be so hesitant. Just speak your mind." Suddenly, Su Erlang stood up, and with a bang, slapped the document onto the table. Su Qian picked up the document. He opened it and glanced through it. Only then did he understand why Su Erlang's expression was so strange. The invitation was for Su Erlang to attend a literary gathering, and one particular phrase stood out: "Evil and beauty cannot coexist." The inviter was none other than the Prime Minister Wang Zhenwen of Defying. Although the invitation followed the usual Confucian values, given the cultivation system, there were also outstanding women among the attendees. Thus, while women still held a lower status than men, their position was not as inferior as it once was. Having female guests at a literary gathering was therefore not uncommon. Su Qian analyzed. Since you're a member of the Chunwei Society, it makes sense for you to be invited to a literary gathering. Su Qian snorted coldly and said, "How foolish. The court is like a battlefield. Although there are many foolish officials who hold high positions, the imperial court's central figures are not among them. Wang's residence is one of the strongest factions in court. Every move he makes, every word, every expression, is worth careful thought and analysis. Otherwise, you might not even know how you died. Big Brother is on Wei Yuan's side. Wang Junwen and Wei Yuan are like two tigers. They can't stand each other. For him to invite me to his residence for a literary gathering, it can't be as simple as it seems. I, Su Xinyan, am a distinguished member of society, with a bright future ahead. Wang's residence is before I fully grow. No, even if I top the imperial exams, it would still be easy for Wang's residence to deal with me. Our status is worlds apart. He wouldn't need schemes or tricks to bring me down. So his invitation must be more than just a simple gathering. But thinking that way is underestimating the opponent. It's underestimating Wang Zhenwen. Frustrated, Su Erlang looked at Su Dazhang and said, "Big brother, say something." Su Qian frowned and said, "How about this? Go ask your fellow classmates who passed the exams if they also received invitations. If you're the only one, then there's certainly something amiss." Su Erlang pointed to the date on the invitation and said, "I already thought of that, but there's no time. The literary gathering is tomorrow morning, and I don't have time to verify it." He suddenly jumped up, exclaiming, "Now I understand." Su Qian, confused, asked, "What do you understand?" Su Erlang took a sharp breath and said, "Wang Zhenwen didn't give me a chance to respond. If I don't go, he'll spread rumors that I'm arrogant and look down on others. That will ruin my reputation. If I do go, there must be schemes waiting at the gathering. The old fox is indeed cunning." Upon hearing this, Su Qian turned and headed out. "If that's how you see it, then this matter can't be resolved. Erlang, you decide for yourself." Su Erlang quickly stopped him. "Brother, since when did you become as dull as Lin Yin? I've said so much, and you still don't get my point? I want you to come with me." Su Qian firmly refused. "No, Erlang, you must remember, though we're brothers, we're not on the same path in the officialdom. You have your own path, your own direction. Don't tie yourself to me." Su Erlang, being smart, understood after a moment. He knew that his brother was actually warning him to avoid any involvement with Wei Yuan. If Wei Yuan fell from power someday, his brother would inevitably be implicated. But if that happened, it wouldn't concern Su Xinyan. His identity would remain as Su Qian's brother, not Wei Yuan's subordinate. Thus, he wouldn't face any retribution. This idea made sense to Su Xinyan. Throughout history, even in prominent families, not all family members were aligned. They belonged to different factions. The advantage of this was that, even if one branch suffered, it would only weaken the family, not destroy it completely. The next morning, Su Qian went to Howren Tower to report to Wei Yuan. But Wei Yuan didn't question the matter of the unbreak. After confirming that Su Qian was in good health, he simply told him to rest well. Su Qian thought to himself, "After all, Lord Wei is just an ordinary person. He doesn't practice martial arts. He's solid in theory but doesn't see the deeper nuances, so he didn't ask me for the details about the unbreakable vajra technique. Heh. Aside from Jianzheng, who's on the second layer, I'm standing on the fifth layer looking down at them." After roll call, several colleagues he was close to, including Song Tingfeng, came over. They sat together drinking tea, snacking on peanuts, and bragging for a while. Eventually, they began urging Su Qian to treat them at the brothel. Su Qian scolded them. "Scram, scram, scram. All you think about is going to the brothel. Haven't you all seen me duel before? What did the old monk under the Bodhi tree say? Lust is like a bone-cutting, and all you ever think about is fooling around. Is this worthy of the badges you wear? If you want to fool around, fine, but why drag me along? Bah, you're all good for nothing." Everyone knew his character and wasn't scared at all. He retorted with, "Who in our office frequents the brothels more than you? You have the nerve to lecture us." Su Qian defended himself. "Don't spread false rumors. I don't pay for it, so how can that be considered visiting a brothel? Sure, we're all friends here, but if you keep talking nonsense, I'll have to report you to Lord Wei for slander." Just then, Song Tingfeng asked sincerely, "Tell us honestly, I heard you got involved with Miss Fuxiang right after joining the Night Watchers. Besides writing poetry, do you have any other tricks?" Su Qian raised an eyebrow smugly. "There's definitely a trick to it. Do you want to learn how to woo the courtesans?" The eager Night Watchers leaned in. "Please teach us the trick." At that moment, a stern voice came from the doorway. "Gathering to chat idly during duty hours? Do you have no regard for discipline?" The group quickly straightened up, trying to appear respectful. "Apologies, Commander Jiang. Su Ningyan was just teaching us how to sleep with a courtesan for free." The commander's sharp gaze swept over the group. "Humph, always dreaming your big dreams. Enough, enough. Go ahead and chat, just don't linger too long." The Coppergong rank officer smirked but didn't expose him, knowing full well he probably wanted to listen too. Zhang turned and left, but hadn't gone far before quietly returning, hiding in a corner to eavesdrop. At that moment, Song Tingfeng nudged Su Qian. Su Ningyan, keep talking. Su Qian feigned a serious demeanor. He coughed lightly and said, my throat's a bit dry. Song Tingfeng immediately understood, and though reluctant, he got up for the sake of the courtesan. He poured a cup of tea for Su Qian, conceding to the situation. Su Qian took a sip, cleared his throat, and began speaking confidently. Indeed, Fu Xiang took an interest in me because of a poem, but what truly bound her to me wasn't poetry. The group eagerly asked, what was it? Su Qian countered. Do you know what women hate most in men? Zhu Guangxiao, usually silent, answered first. Is it lack of ambition? Song Tingfeng offered his opinion too. Could it be cowardice? Su Qian shook his head. Wrong. It's procrastination and excuses. The night watchers fell silent, contemplating his statement. What's the reasoning behind that? How does it connect to why Fu Xiang couldn't leave you? Su Qian's expression grew serious. When we first got together, she closed the door and asked me if I was up to the task. And later, I proved myself capable. Since then, she hasn't been able to leave me. The room fell silent, and skeptical thoughts arose among the group. Song Tingfeng murmured, I suspect you're lying, but I have no proof. Su Qian replied nonchalantly, that's natural. This isn't something just anyone can grasp, especially men who lack ability. I've already shared the secret with you. Whether you can grasp it depends on your own skills. From a hidden corner, someone, left deep in thought, procrastination and excuses. Does that really work? At first glance, the phrases seemed simple enough, but they felt like they hid some profound truth. Maybe I should ask Lord Wei. With his insight, he could probably grasp this trick immediately. After dismissing his colleagues, Su Qian returned alone to Yidayotang. Not long after, a beautiful maid entered and said, Su Yin Luo, the second princess Zhao Ning, is calling for you. Su Qian, who had been reviewing files at his desk, didn't move. He said calmly, understood. I have matters to attend to here. I'll go later. About a quarter hour later, Su Qian put the files aside, let out a breath, and thought. There's been a growing influx of Jianghu figures into the capital recently. When word of the duel spreads, even more martial artists will flock to the city. This may boost the city's economy, but fraud, extortion, and even home invasions are becoming rampant. Su Qian gestured to a clerk and said, write a petition. First, request that additional troops be drawn from the 13 districts under the capital's jurisdiction to maintain order in the outer city. Second, petition His Majesty to allow the military to assist in patrolling the inner city. Third, during this period, execute those caught breaking and entering, execute robbers caught in the act, and execute those causing public disturbances, injuring passers-by, or damaging merchants' property. The first two measures lay the groundwork for the third. Strict punishment will drive criminals to extremes, so we'll need strong forces and skilled fighters to suppress them. To quickly eliminate this chaos and restore stability, we must use harsh measures to deter these scoundrels. After the petition was written, another attendant entered and said, the Princess of Huiqing invites you to the palace. Su Qian furrowed his brow. Why does Huiqing want to see me too? Both princesses summoning me at the same time. Who should I meet first? Huiqing is too clever. She won't be easily appeased. She's also quite reserved, so if she's displeased with me, she won't show it outwardly. I can never be sure when she might set a trap for me. On the other hand, Lingyan is relatively straightforward. She's spoiled and headstrong, often throwing tantrums, but she doesn't hold ground. Once she's vented, it's over. Su Qian pondered briefly and made his decision. He decided to offend Lingyan first, because she seemed easier to placate. Meanwhile, an unassuming carriage pulled up in front of the royal residence. Su Xinyan lifted the curtain, stepped onto the stool the driver had prepared, and got out. He turned back and extended a hand to his sister. Su Lingyue whispered, second brother, you've been lost in thought this whole trip. Are you nervous? Su Xinyan's face was stern as he replied coolly, your second brother wouldn't be nervous even if he met the emperor himself. He lowered his voice to his sister and said, once we're inside, listen and observe more, speak less. You're just here as a companion, so you won't be involved in anything. As for me. At that moment, a steward from the royal residence arrived. Smiling, he said, Mr. Su, you're here. Please come in. Su Xinyan didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he took a long look at the residence's plaque. A surge of courage and determination welled up in him. He was undeniably a standout among his peers. Though he knew the mountain held tigers, he was determined to confront the prime minister of the dynasty. After all, it was a rare opportunity. The siblings followed the attendant for a long time, crossing corridors and courtyards, until they finally arrived at a garden. In the spacious garden, clear recitations, mingled with playful laughter, a woman with delicate features and an elegant demeanor stood up and greeted them graciously. Young Master Su, Miss Su, Please have a seat. As she finished speaking, the other guests raised their wine glasses. Su Xinyan glanced around and thought, as I expected, apart from me, there are no other students from the Cloud Deer Academy here. These people are all students of the Imperial Academy. But he maintained a composed smile, engaging with the other guests for a while. To his surprise, they were unexpectedly polite. There was no veiled hostility, no overt provocations. It truly seemed like a simple gathering of scholars. Su Xinyan's heart momentarily eased. But he knew that with Wang Shoufu's cunning, an open challenge would be beneath him. He must have something hidden up his sleeve, truly worthy of being Wang Shoufu's man. Just his presence puts me on high alert. On the other side, Su Lingyue was seated beside Miss Wang. Miss Wang offered a warm smile. How old are you this year, Miss Su? Su Lingyue replied softly, I just turned 17 this year. Miss Wang's smile grew even more enthusiastic. Since I'm 19, may I call you Sister Lingyue? Feel free to call me Sister Simu. After chatting a bit more, Su Lingyue realized who this gentle, kind woman was. It had to be the legitimate daughter of Wang Shoufu. Just then, Miss Wang suddenly asked, Sister Lingyue, are you betrothed yet? Su Lingyue lowered her head slightly, and replied in a soft voice, Not yet. Miss Wang pressed on. I suppose your brothers must be engaged by now. Shouldn't you hurry and catch up? Su Lingyue glanced at her, momentarily puzzled. Then clarity returned to her eyes. Following Miss Wang's lead, she replied, Simujia, you're joking. My two elder brothers aren't engaged yet. They have no marriage arrangements. Miss Wang and the other young ladies nearby were delighted to hear this. After all, whether it was the dashing and carefree Su Xinyan or the dashing and spirited Su Qian, among the capital's noble ladies, their curiosity toward them was insatiable. At this moment, a young lady in purple spoke mockingly, Heh, the Su families really landed in a fine spot. That Su Qian was originally just a petty constable in Chang'an County, and Su Pingji wasn't even a full centurion. With a family background like that, Miss Su would be lucky to marry into a merchant's family. But who knows? Maybe she can land herself a prominent household. Su Lingyue couldn't figure out this young lady's background, and dared not confront her openly. She instead adopted a pitiful demeanor, lowering her head like a wronged young bride, evoking sympathy. The other noble girls saw this and began to feel some resentment toward the purple-clad girl. Miss Wang squinted slightly, speaking gently, Yenner, watch your tone. Lingyue. Yenner is the niece of the Minister of Justice. Su Lingyue's heart skipped a beat. So, she's the niece of the Minister of Justice. She recalled how the assistant minister's son, Zhou Li, had conspired with the Ministry of Justice to imprison her brother. So, it's a family feud. Su Lingyue forced herself to suppress her feelings. Yenerjia has a straightforward nature. She's not wrong. My elder brother is just a warrior. My second brother also holds no position or rank. The young lady called Yenner hesitated, wondering whether to continue the topic. If she did, she would have to publicly mock Su Qian and Su Xinyan further. But with one of them present, and the other's reputation so high, she wasn't bold enough. Miss Wang quickly changed the subject. All right, let's all have some tea. The gathering continued as planned. The scholars shifted their discussion from poetry to national affairs, occasionally chatting with the noblewomen. The atmosphere remained lively. Su Xinyan, finding himself at ease, felt rather cheerful. He then excused himself, saying he wished to enjoy the garden's scenery. Holding his wine cup, he walked aside, pondering what scheme Wang Shoufu might have. He stared absent-mindedly at a pool of withered lotus leaves, thinking, the bloom is near, yet the flowers are already withering. Just then, a gentle voice came from behind him. These are red lotuses from Qinzhou. They bloom only in midwinter, then wither as spring approaches. However, the climate here in Jincheng is very different from Qinzhou, so the red lotuses don't grow well, and they lack ornamental value. Su Xinyan turned to look, and saw a well-featured young woman. Now knowing her identity, he bowed and said, Miss Wang. She said, call me Simu. Su Xinyan nodded, not declining, and replied, Miss Simu. Wang Simu smiled sweetly, and in a gentle voice said, Young Master Su, that Traveling the Difficult Road poem is one I admire every day in my room. Su Erlang replied humbly, when it comes to poetry, my elder brother is unmatched. But as they say, great art is born naturally, found by lucky chance. I, too, have had my moments of fortunate inspiration. Su Xinyan felt a bit guilty after boasting, but then reminded himself that using his brother's work to gain prestige was perfectly justifiable. After all, family doesn't stand on ceremony. His elder brother's achievements were his own. Meanwhile, Su Lingyue was seated by the pond, bored, watching the scenery in the breeze. The literary gathering held little appeal. She didn't belong to that circle, and moreover, these scholars couldn't hold a candle to her elder brothers. Even though these people were gongshi, her brothers were in a different league. Suddenly, a cold sneer came from behind her. The girl in purple walked over and glared at Su Lingyue. You little wench, pretending to be pitiful earlier. Su Lingyue lowered her head and softly replied, What is Yenerjia saying? I was just acting pitiful. The purple-clad girl sneered. With those petty tricks, you dare to show off in front of me? You know very well if you were pretending or not. A low-born girl from some rural martial family. Do you even deserve to sit here? Do you deserve to share a seat with me? Little wretch like you. Only knows some cheap, worthless stunts. Looking like a backwater girl. You believe I wouldn't sell you off to a brothel to let you experience real hardship? Su Lingyue still lowered her head. If elder sister dislikes me, is it because of my elder brother? The girl in purple sneered. At least you're self-aware. Now get out of the Wang mansion, and don't let me see you here again. The girl in purple was unaccustomed to such humiliation. That Su Qian, who opposed her uncle, was naturally one reason, but another reason was this little tramp's act of feigned pity to win the sympathy of the other girls, making her feel embarrassed and humiliated. Su Lingyue suddenly felt aggrieved. The literary gathering was brought by her second brother. How could she leave midway? Elder sister, can you help me out? Then Su Lingyue discreetly extended her hand and pinched the girl in purple's waist hard. The girl's face went pale with pain, and she let out a sharp cry, ready to retaliate, but then saw Su Lingyue stumble back and fall with a splash into the pond. What followed was Su Lingyue struggling in the water, crying for help. Her shrill screams carried, drawing the attention of everyone present. Hearing the cries, Su Xinyan looked over and saw Su Lingyue flailing in the water, seemingly drowning. His expression changed drastically. Without time to explain to Miss Wang, he rushed over. Diving into the pond, he grabbed Su Lingyue by the waist and dragged her to the surface. Miss Wang quickly instructed the maids, "Go fetch my big cloak from the room, hurry." The maids fetched the cloak, and Miss Wang personally draped it over Su Lingyue. Su Xinyan's face darkened as he lowered his head and asked, "Lingyue, what happened?" Su Lingyue sniffled, her hair sticking to her pale face. She looked fragile and pitiful, stammering, "I don't know. That sister told me to leave the Wang mansion, saying I'm not worthy to share a seat with her. When I ignored her, she pushed me into the pond." Girl in purple flushed with anger, pointing at Su Lingyue and cursing, "You wretch! How dare you frame me? You were the one who pinched me first." Don't believe her. This little wretch is framing me. She threw herself into the water on purpose. One young lady frowned and muttered. Even though Yin gave her a hard time, it doesn't seem likely that she would push her into the water. The girl in purple pointed accusingly at Su Lingyue, shouting, "She did it herself. She deliberately fell into the water. She's trying to frame me. That little wretch is so wicked." Su Lingyue ignored the surrounding stares, letting tears roll down her cheeks. She whispered, "Second brother, did elder brother offend someone?" This Yinyan's sister said, "That elder brother often goes against her uncle, and while she can't do anything to him, she could sell me off to a brothel." Su Xinyan's fury flared instantly. He stared coldly at the girl in purple. "And which family might you be from?" Miss Wang looked a little guilty and said quietly, "Yinyan's uncle is Sun Shangshu from the Ministry of Justice." Everyone suddenly understood, their faces reflecting realization. They all knew about the feud between Sun Shangshu and Su Qian. That famous poem mocking Sun Shangshu, written by Su Qian, was still a topic of great interest. Given Su Qian's reputation, that poem was sure to be remembered by history. Sun Shangshu's name would be tarnished for generations. In that context, Yinyan's motive for pushing Su Qian's sister into the water was clear and compelling. Su Xinyan asked, "You claim my sister pinched you. Where did she pinch you exactly?" The girl in purple, eyes blazing with anger, retorted, "She pinched me on the waist." Su Xinyan let out a cold snort and said, "What a clever scheme, Mississippi. You know that scholars must avoid improper contact, so there's no way to verify. Everything depends on your word alone." The girl in purple was taken aback, suddenly realizing why that little brat had pinched her waist. Now, even if she was in the right, she couldn't explain it. She stubbornly argued back, "I can have another woman verify it." Su Xinyan sneered, "Why don't you pinch yourself right now? That will leave a mark too. My sister isn't clever with words. Then she'll have no way to defend herself, right?" The girl in purple's eyes filled with angry tears. She pointed at Su Xinyan and snapped, "Don't get cocky. You're just a mere scholar. Who do you think you are? What can you do to me?" Before her words were fully out, there was a loud slap. Su Xinyan backhanded her across the face. The girl in purple staggered, her cheek immediately swelling red. She covered her face, staring in disbelief. "You dare hit me?" Everyone was shocked, never expecting Su Xinyan to act so decisively, to hit a woman without hesitation. Su Xinyan coldly declaring, "Everyone here has witnessed today's events. I'm taking her to see a magistrate right now. I'll call on you all as witnesses, but we won't go to the Ministry of Justice or the local yamen. We'll go to the Night Watcher's office." Faces around the group changed. The Night Watcher's office was no ordinary place. Once you entered, not even the Ministry of Justice could override them. If they were to press charges, it could easily lead to a conviction for attempted murder. Even if the Ministry of Justice intervened, the girl's reputation would be ruined. What kind of decent family would take her after that? Fear flickered in the girl in purple's eyes. She quickly moved to Wang Xiaojia's side, crying, "Sister Simu, please save me." I don't want to go to the night watcher's office. Wang Simu immediately looked towards Su Lingyue, hint of pleading in her eyes. But Su Lingyue just glanced coldly at the girl in purple, then turned her head away indifferently. It was clear she wasn't going to intervene. Wang Simu's mind raced as she thought to herself, Su Lingyue isn't someone easily trifled with. Now, Wang Simu felt stuck. The literary gathering was held at his residence. If he allowed Su Xinyan to take someone away, it would intensify the hostility between the Ministry of Justice and his father. But if he stopped Su Xinyan, he would completely offend him, a situation he didn't want. So Wang Simu decided to resolve the matter privately. He looked at Su Xinyan and said, Young Master Su, Yenner made an unintentional mistake. I will have her apologize and compensate Lingyue with the appropriate damages. Could you let it rest on my account? Su Xinyan said flatly, Very well, for Miss Wang's sake. I won't press charges. At this, Wang Simu led the Su siblings into a side hall to discuss the apology and compensation. He said apologetically, Yenner is unruly and spoiled. She was wrong and should make amends. How about 500 taels of silver? Su Xinyan remained indifferent. Silver is a small matter. It's really about the attitude. Wang Simu glanced at the girl in purple. He softly called her over. She looked down in frustration. Yet, under the pressure of the situation, she had to rise and apologize. I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Please forgive me, young Master Su and Miss Su. Only then did Su Xinyan nod. 1,000 taels, no less. It was premeditated murder. The girl in purple was stunned. This sudden increase was like a slap to her face, but she had no choice but to endure it. Gritting her teeth, she agreed. She vowed to find a chance for revenge later. After settling the matter, Wang Simu fetched a 1,000-tael banknote and handed it to Su Xinyan with a gentle smile. Young Master Su, please take Lingyue home quickly, change into dry clothes, and avoid catching a cold. The siblings left the Wang residence. Once outside, Su Xinyan handed the 1,000-tael banknote to Su Lingyue, saying gruffly, Sister, take this silver note. It'll be part of your dowry one day. He then placed a hand on Su Lingyue's shoulder, saying casually, You're boiling with anger. Don't catch a chill. Su Lingyue felt a warm current flow through, dispelling her chill. She exhaled a comforting breath, murmuring, Second brother, you're too good to me. I'm sorry for making you leave early. Su Xinyan said nonchalantly, Leaving early is for the best. Honestly, I don't have much confidence going against Wang Shoufu. Leaving before he arrived was the wisest choice. It's called avoiding harm. It's what a gentleman would do. But that Miss Wang, she's something else. Su Lingyue giggled. Miss Wang has an extraordinary poise, and she's very organized. She can handle herself well. From start to finish, she managed everything seamlessly. Even though it wasn't her problem, her willingness to apologize was commendable. She's got the air of a leader. Su Xinyan smirked and said, That's just part of it. When you fell into the water, she didn't have you change clothes at her place. It's partly to show that dead-end girl from the Ministry of Justice, but also to show us. Lingyue, if I'm not mistaken, you jumped into the water on your own. Su Lingyue's lips curled slightly, and her face lost any trace of weakness. She smiled. Second brother, do you know why Big Brother is more likable than you? Su Xinyan's competitive spirit flared, and he retorted coldly, I've always been more likable than him. Su Lingyue shook her head and said, If it were Big Brother, he'd be fussing over me right now, apologizing for not protecting me better. Also, he'd clearly know what was going on, but he wouldn't mention it. Su Xinyan's face froze in shock. He had to admit that he had lost. Back at the Wang residence, Miss Wang held a handkerchief and wiped the tears of the girl in purple. What do you mean you're the legitimate daughter, raised in this household, strutting about with arrogance? No one dared provoke you. You've seen through some things, but your lifelong temper has made you prefer bluntness. This is not right. In the future, once married, you'll suffer for it. The girl in purple protested, her voice filled with grievance. But that little wretch fell into the water herself, she said. Miss Wang sighed. That's irrelevant. What matters is what people think. If they believe you pushed her, then you pushed her. The girl in purple became angry. Sister, you're not even helping me. Miss Wang said helplessly. I can't take on those two siblings. She felt quite pleased, though. Today, she'd gained quite a lot. First, Su Xinyan hadn't clarified, nor did he have a marriage arrangement. Second, she'd gotten a clear sense of Su Lingyue's character. Third, though their interaction was brief, Su Xinyan's personality and demeanor greatly appealed to her. He was not only handsome, but also assertive, intelligent, opinionated, and shrewd. Most importantly, he was willing to offend the Minister of Justice for the sake of his family. There have been countless ambitious and brilliant men throughout history, but few would prioritize their female relatives above all else, raise such clever children, and nurture such a talented nephew. The matriarch of the Su family must be quite extraordinary. Thinking about this, Miss Wang's eyes gleamed sharply, filled with determination. Over at the palace, Su Qian stepped into Dexing Hall and saw Huiqing, the princess who was as serene and ethereal as a goddess from a painting. She gently inquired, Is your body well? Su Qian smiled. It's nothing serious. I'm as strong as a bull. A short rest and I'll be fine. Huaiqing nodded in relief. Winning this competition, the court will surely reward you. Still, it's easy to receive a title, but hard to advance. You could propose it to the emperor. Su Cijou's future would then be secure. Su Qian thought to himself, whoever marries Huaiqing will be like a king getting zhuge liang. An absolutely brilliant suggestion. Making a small sacrifice to secure my younger brother's future and pave the way for his rise. However, outwardly he lamented, it's a shame. I've already requested an imperial pardon. Huaiqing frowned slightly. An imperial pardon? What do you want with that? Sometimes it works wonders, but other times it's worthless. Su Qian understood her meaning. The usefulness of such a pardon depended entirely on the emperor. If Emperor Yuanjing lacked integrity, the pardon was just a piece of paper. Nonetheless, the fact that Huaiqing shared such thoughts showed her sincerity. Huaiqing dropped the matter and continued. So you've mastered the diamond indestructible form? Su Qian stretched out his hand. Blood and flesh quickly solidified into golden muscle. His entire arm shimmered with a faint golden glow. Huaiqing, however, looked unimpressed. She said quietly, do you know how many martial artists covet this? Right now, you are highly regarded. Nobody will openly target you. Keep those around you close. Also, watch out for yourself. Don't give anyone an opening. You must remember, Wei Gong is not invincible. Su Qian fell silent. With the strength I showed at the competition, even the most greedy martial artists wouldn't dare make a move on me. But what Huaiqing meant was clear. Those who covet me are not from the Jianghu. They are the nobility and military. In the capital, the ones eyeing my diamond indestructible form are these groups. Su Qian said earnestly, thank you, Your Highness, for the reminder. They chatted a bit more. Huaiqing said casually, the picture book you gave me last time, my maids enjoyed it. They said it was quite amusing. Although I don't read such things, I couldn't resist their repeated requests. So, as for the follow-up to this book, the princess couldn't help it any longer. Her face burned bright red. She was clearly itching to see the rest of the story. Su Qian said with a smile, if Your Highness wants it, I'll send it in a few days. Huaiqing gave a dignified nod. No rush, it's just a few maids who want to read it. That's all. Tomorrow, if you have nothing else to do, you can bring it then. Su Qian thought to himself, you say there's no rush, but you're obviously in a hurry. All right then, I'll get my scribe Zhongli to transcribe it tonight. After a few more words of small talk, Su Qian found a polite reason to leave. He turned and headed toward Shaoying Courtyard, but a guard raised a hand to block him. Stop right there. The princess has ordered. No visitors today. Su Qian reminded him, it was Her Highness who invited me. Just go tell her. But the guard remained firm. Please don't make things difficult for me, sir. Please leave. Su Qian felt a surge of frustration. Striking a palace guard was a serious offense. Guess you're lucky, he muttered to himself, but he also realized Linen was upset. She must have found out he had visited Huaiqing first. Su Qian quickly came up with a response. If Her Highness wants me here, fine. I'll just wait outside. Meanwhile, at the Haoqi Tower, Zhang Luzhong was sitting by the water's edge. He sipped the tea brought by his maid. After a taste, he sighed. I remember last year, drinking tea here at Lord Wei's residence. It was truly invigorating. The fragrance lingered for 3 whole hours. Wei Yuan, standing at a bookshelf behind him, didn't even turn around. He said calmly, that was palace tribute tea. Only 3 pounds are produced every 3 years. Even His Majesty rarely drinks it. Zhang Luzhong wondered curiously where exactly this amazing tea came from. Wei Yuan calmly replied, it comes from the capital. The capital has such fine tea? How come I've never heard of it before? Wei Yuan's voice was calm and deep. It's grown by a woman. She's in the capital. The tea comes from the capital. Zhang Luzhong didn't ask any more questions, but instead said, I heard Lin Yin mention something today. He said that Fang Xi thrives like a fish in water, earning the admiration of the courtesans for a reason. Wei Yuan smiled. Beauties love poetry, especially courtesans. Zhang Luzhong shook his head and said, not quite. Besides poetry, there are 2 other secrets, mutual exchange and whether it actually works. I pondered for a long time, but found nothing. Of course, it's not that I wish to become such a person. I'm merely curious. Lord Wei, with your vast knowledge, you're well versed in the heavens above and the earth below. So I came specifically to ask you for guidance. I believe that with Lord Wei's expertise, you must know the answer. After speaking, Zhang Luzhong saw Wei Yuan turn to face him, gazing at him calmly. The two stared at each other for several seconds. Wei Yuan looked away and said casually, Luzhong, you've been with me for almost 10 years, haven't you? Zhang Luzhong nodded in slight confusion. Wei Yuan continued, for these 10 years, you've been diligent and dutiful. I've taken note of it all. I'm very pleased. Well, I need to keep reading. You may go now. Zhang Luzhong was a bit perplexed. Lord Wei hadn't answered his question, but since Lord Wei had spoken, he had no choice but to leave. Just as he left Haoqi building, a maid walked up to him and said, Zhang Luzhong, Lord Wei has an order for you. Zhang Luzhong asked in confusion, didn't he just dismiss me? What is it? The maid continued, Lord Wei said. Jiang Luzong is diligent and dutiful, hardworking and conscientious. Keep up the good work. For the next month, you'll be on night duty. Lord Wei also mentioned, he'd like you to pack up and move to the office. No need to return home for now. Jiang Luzong was dumbfounded. Is this how a diligent and hard-working subordinate is treated? What kind of order is this? Staying on night duty for a month straight? That means for the next month, not only would I have no free time, I wouldn't even be able to see any women. Over at the Shaoying Palace in the capital, Su Qian's wife had been waiting for an hour. The young maid regularly reported, Master Su is still waiting outside. Linen replied with a restrained hum, and that was it. The young maid, sighing, stepped back, thinking, our princess is always moody. Why not let a man as outstanding as Master Su go to Princess Huaqing instead? After 15 minutes, she went to check again and saw Master Su still standing there. She felt moved, but just as that thought crossed her mind, she saw Master Su suddenly sway, and then collapse, unconscious. The young maid and the gate guards panicked, rushing over to check on him. Master Su's face was pale, his brows tightly knit in pain. Su Qian slowly came to, coughing a few times, and said faintly, I'm fine. It's just that the injuries I got from fighting the mage were too severe, and I stood too long just now. The wounds acted up again. I just need a little rest. The young maid felt both heartache and admiration. Master Su, please go back for now. The second princess is still angry, and won't see you. Su Qian feigned surprise, and asked indignantly, what's wrong with her highness? Who dared to anger her? The young maid was taken aback and stammered. It was that person who upset her highness. Isn't it you? He whispered. It's like this. The guards at Shaoying Palace saw Master Su enter the palace, but he went to Defying Palace first. Su Qian fell silent, his expression bleak and despondent. The young maid, seeing he didn't explain, felt disappointed. Master Su, please leave. Come back another day when her highness is no longer upset. With that, she left Su Qian behind and went back inside. She hurried all the way to the inner courtyard's pavilion, speaking quickly. Your highness. Master Su just fainted. Linen looked up sharply, a flash of alarm and worry crossing her face. He fainted? What happened? The young maid lowered her head and replied, Master Su said he had been standing too long, and that the injuries from yesterday's battle relapsed. Linen, agitated, scolded, you fools. I never told him to wait. If he hasn't left yet, just let him come in. Soon, Su Qian was brought to a side hall. He sipped some hot tea, and waited for a while. Then he saw Linen enter in her red dress, her face cold as she said, Didn't I say I wouldn't see any guests? Why did you let him in? Linen's scolding had a tinge of defensiveness. Her gaze soon landed on Su Qian. After looking him over, her expression softened slightly. Master Su, for your contributions to the court, I won't let you suffer in vain. Bring the items in. The senior palace maid, whom Su Qian had once slapped, entered holding some medicinal herbs and pills, and respectfully said, these medicinal materials and pills were obtained after much pleading. Even His Majesty reluctantly agreed to part with them. Master Su, take them with you. Linen raised an eyebrow, snorting, keep your comments to yourself and see him out. However, Su Qian didn't leave. With a shameless grin, he said, I've been studying Go for a long time, and I've developed a winning strategy. I'm unbeatable. Your Highness, would you dare to challenge me? Linen, intrigued, nodded and agreed to play. She instructed the maid to bring the chessboard in pieces, and she and Su Qian battled it out in the hall. Su Qian lost all 3 rounds, admitting defeat. He then flattered her. Your Highness, you are indeed brilliant. I am truly impressed. Linen lifted her chin proudly, then remembered he was an ungrateful scoundrel, and grunted, the game is over. I won't keep you any longer. But Su Qian, always full of tricks, said, wait, Your Highness. I just thought of a new way to play. If you're interested, I can teach you. Suddenly, the quiet Shaoying courtyard bustled with activity. Linen directed the guards to chop wood, while Su Qian took the locks, and cut them into smaller pieces. Then he took a carving knife, and shaped each piece into a flat circle, engraving characters onto them. During the process, Linen also helped by inking the finished pieces. Unnoticed, the sun had begun to set. A brand new chess set was complete. Su Qian said, it's getting late. I'll explain the rules, then I should leave the palace. Linen looked at the 2 chess sets that she and her servant had personally made, and smiled genuinely. Initially, she only befriended Su Qian to see something from Huaqing, but over time, she grew fond of this rascal. She found different ways to give him silver, treated him with genuine kindness, never expecting anything in return. She just wanted him to stop by and spend some time with her. That made her happy, but she always had a nagging thought. That was, Su Qian continued to have an improper relationship with Huaqing. Even though he had promised to serve her, he was still secretly in contact with Huaqing. She pretended not to notice more than once. Today, she finally reached her limit. She had endured scolding from the emperor for requesting the pills. He shamelessly endured it. The next day, he sent someone to invite Su Qian. He waited cheerfully, but the reply from the guards was, he went to Defying Palace. For a brief moment, he felt utterly humiliated. He thought of himself as pathetic, realizing Su Qian didn't truly value him. That thought alone made him want to cry. At that very moment, Su Qian let out a long sigh. In a low voice, he said, "Your Highness, I just went to Defying Palace earlier." His face fell instantly, and he turned away saying, "I don't know what Defying Palace is. You came straight to me after entering the palace." Su Qian replied seriously, "No, I went to see Princess Huaqing first." His eyes reddened slightly. He shouted, "Su Qian." Su Qian sighed again, speaking slowly and deliberately, "Your Highness, have you ever heard this saying? Life is and you'll meet many people, but the choice you make in the end reflects your truest desires. Today, both Your Highness and Princess Huaqing invited me, and without hesitation, I chose to see her. Why? It's not that she matters more than you. If I had come to Shaoying Courtyard first, I wouldn't have been able to stay long. I would have had to leave soon, to visit Defying Palace to meet her. Could I have ignored Huaqing's invitation? But if I went to Defying Palace first, I could then stay here with Your Highness, until the palace gates closed. Between Your Highness and Huaqing, which one weighs more in my heart? Isn't it clear by now?" His gaze gradually softened, his expression shifting from cold to gentle. Su Qian sat back down, his eyes lingering on linen as if watching a sunset. In a tender voice he said, "Because I know, what Your Highness needs is companionship." He glanced around the room. After confirming that the palace maids had left, he boldly took hold of Linen's soft hand. Sincerely he said, "Your Highness, I'll always be by your side." This struck a chord in Linen's heart. Indeed, he felt lonely and isolated, but the warmth of the hand he held was like a gentle stream melting his inner coldness. Time slipped quietly by, and Su Qian slowly let go of her hand. A subtle, ambiguous tension lingered between them, but it was getting late. So he reluctantly stood up and said, "Your Highness, I must go now. If you'd like to see me every day, you can move to Linen Mansion. No need to stay in the palace." Linen's cheeks flushed red, and she turned away, not daring to meet his gaze. She said haughtily, "We'll see." Over at the mansion, Wang Zhenwen returned home after his dismissal, had dinner, and, as usual, went to his study to review documents. Wang Simo brought him a nourishing tonic. Wang Zhenwen asked, "I heard from the servants today that a member of Yunlu Academy visited the mansion. Is that true?" Wang Simo recounted the event in detail, and then huffed, "Father, I invited that Su member because I thought he was talented, but it turns out he's overly emotional, lacking restraint. He's mediocre. Father, you should discipline him and avenge Sister Yenner." Wang Shoufu seemed more thoughtful. He replied calmly, having followed the Confucian path of cultivation, his temperament wouldn't be too far off for someone to earn a member's status at Yunlu Academy. He's undoubtedly talented. As for the little conflicts between you, don't bring them to the surface. Wang Simo quickly smiled and said, "Then it seems my thoughts align with yours, Father. Do you think it's possible to win him over?" Wang Zhenwen asked, "Why would we need to win him over? Even if he's talented, there's no absolute necessity. It's not worth offending the civil officials from Gua Zijian's faction. Besides, I'm a prime minister, a model for civil officials." Wang Simo said, "Precisely because you're a model for civil officials, if we can recruit him to the not only would it curb Yunlu Academy's arrogance, but we'd also gain a great talent. It's the best of both worlds." Wang Zhenwen shook his head and said, "Without a special reason, recruiting this person would be more trouble than it's worth." Miss Wang wanted to say more, but her father gave her a glance, and she immediately dropped the idea. Besides, he still needed more time to evaluate the Su family's second son. Meanwhile, in a modest woodshed, at the Nanqing Health Hall, a golden glow gradually dimmed. Monk Jinshun calmed the black dog, putting him into a sweet slumber. A middle-aged monk with large earlobes and a compassionate face chanted, "Amitabha. This child surviving until now is..." Heng Yuan replied, "Thanks to Master Su's connections, the astrologers from the Celestial Division treated his illness." Monk Jinshin reflected, "Over these years, I've traveled through the mortal world and witnessed countless joys and sorrows. All beings suffer. I often wonder, why do thousands of Buddha lamps exist, yet they never seem to penetrate the layers of worldly darkness? Only yesterday, I fully grasped the great accomplishment of the Dharma. I realized that pursuing grades, seeking the Arhat or Bodhisattva fruit, is a small accomplishment, a way of saving oneself. Only by saving all sentient beings can one achieve the great accomplishment of the Dharma. If everyone carried compassion in their hearts, would the Buddha lamps still be necessary? No, they wouldn't be." Heng Yuan folded his hands, bowing solemnly, and said, "Master Su truly is a divine figure." Monk Jinshan continued, "He was born a child of the Buddha, a gift from heaven to the Buddhist order. I believe he will one day achieve full enlightenment and enter the monastic life." Heng Yuan's heart was filled with warmth. I eagerly await that day. Monk Jinshen nodded and said, this child has a weak constitution, and his vitality is damaged. His condition won't return to normal anytime soon. He can't handle long journeys. My suggestion is to send him to Qinglong Monastery. As for you, it's time to head west. After reaching the 8th rank, the next step is the 3rd rank of Vajra. If you don't practice Vajra divine techniques, you'll never become a Vajra master. Hung Yuan hesitated for a long time before slowly shaking his head and saying, just now, you said, saving oneself is a small accomplishment, but saving all beings is the true great accomplishment. Jinshen was taken aback, then lowered his head in shame. Hung Yuan added, you're right, Master Uncle. You do indeed have greater spiritual wisdom. So be it. So be it. The evil entity has been free for months now, and it will be a while before we can track it down again. The poetry and scripture group will take us back west tomorrow. Spreading the great Dharma is the priority now. Hung Yuan, we'll meet again someday. Hung Yuan recited a Buddhist prayer and personally saw Jinshen monk off, but just as he turned around, he suddenly saw an old Taoist standing in the courtyard shadows, smiling at him. At the Su residence, Su Qian rode his mare back home and heard Su Xinyan talking about the literary gathering that day. He mentioned casually that Lingyue had been pushed into a pool. Su Qian was startled. What? Lingyue fell into the water? He hurried to his younger sister's side, fussing. Are you okay? Do you have a headache or a fever? Could you catch a cold? Su Lingyue replied softly, no. Don't worry, brother. I took some medicine after coming home, so I won't catch a cold. Su Qian shot Su Erling a glare. What happened? How were you looking after her? She fell into water at a literary gathering? What's the point of you then? Su Lingyue quickly said. It wasn't second brother's fault. He can't keep an eye on me every second. Besides, it happened so suddenly. Second brother pulled me out immediately. The one who pushed me into the water was the Minister of Justice's niece. She already apologized and compensated me. Su Qian raised his eyebrows. The Minister of Justice's niece? I see. He sneered. Fine. I'll send someone to stake out the Sun Mansion. When his niece comes out, I'll have a carriage run her down, kill her and be done with it. Su Erlang hurriedly spoke up to stop him. He knew his big brother was capable of actually doing something like that. After saying that, Su Qian looked at Lingyue with a guilty expression. Tearfully, he said, Sister, it's my fault for dragging you into this. Su Lingyue said, What are you talking about, big? We're family. Don't be so formal. Finally, Su Erlang couldn't bear it anymore. He gave his overly dramatic brother a stern glare. After dinner, Su Qian embarked on his long journey of cultivation, practicing breathing techniques, meditation, nurturing righteousness, and comprehending the Vajra indestructible skill. It felt like being back in his student days, burning the midnight oil under a heavy workload. Suddenly, clouds of mist swirled before his eyes, and he saw layers of haze. Once again, he entered the world of the sage monk. Through the mist, he arrived at a dilapidated temple, and saw the handsome monk seated in meditation. The sage monk said gently, I am about to go into deep slumber. I won't be able to wake up anytime soon. I won't be able to ensure your safety. Here's one drop of my essence blood for cultivating the Vajra indestructible skill. Su Qian was both startled and delighted. Your blood can help cultivate Vajra indestructibility? The sage monk smiled and flicked a drop of essence blood into his brow. You should understand what my indestructible body is based upon. For others, this technique is difficult and progresses slowly. But for you, you'll reach a profound level in a short time. This way, you'll have enough power to protect yourself. Having said that, the sage monk sent him out of the misty world again, and Su Qian opened his eyes in his room. Immediately afterward, he thought to himself, what the hell? With a loud explosion from within Su Qian's body, his skin began to bulge with thick muscles. Blood vessels popped out prominently, all imbued with an After an indeterminate amount of time, his Vajra indestructible skill had become refined. Now, if he fought against Monk Jingxi, it wouldn't be clear who would win. But soon after, Su Qian sank into contemplation. The sage monk was a member of the Buddhist order, a seemingly immortal existence. Such a being pointed him to participate in the duel on behalf of the celestial sword, thus granting him Vajra indestructibility. It was as if everything was set up for him, but the way it was done so blatantly, it felt as if he was being cultivated like a crop. At that moment, his room's door was lightly knocked. Su Qian got up and opened the door. Standing outside in the night was an elderly Taoist, holding a whisk and smiling. Behind him stood the Green Mountain swordsman, Chu Yuanzhen, Wu Gaoda, and Lu Jixin. The Taoist named Jinlian said, A friend of mine is in trouble. I hope you can help, Master Su. Su Qian feigned a puzzled look. Where is this friend of yours now? Do I need to mobilize court personnel? Chu Yuanzhen shook his head. He's in Xiangzhou, south of the capital. Not too far, not too close. It's about 400 kilometers away. Su Qian frowned. If the Taoist has a request, it's my duty to assist, but I need to first request leave at the office. After all, it's a long journey. Jinlian Taoist said, Time is tight. Let your servants request leave tomorrow. We'll depart tonight. By the way, where is that seer who's usually by your side? Su Qian's eyes narrowed slightly. The Taoist seems very anxious. It appears number 5 is in serious trouble. He immediately called Zhongli over, and she agreed to join them. However, Chu Yuanjin seemed perplexed. In the middle of the night, why was this woman in Su Qian's room? Shortly after, the 5 of them, led by Jinlian Taoist, vanished into the night from the Su residence. A pedestrian exited Su's residence, led by Su Qian, wearing the silver sash. Whether it was the night watchman or the guards with knives, they just performed routine questioning. No further hindrances. On the road, Taoist Jinlian watched Su Qian. Chun Shengdao number 5 is missing. Chu Yuanjin immediately looked at him. Why would the Taoist talk to Su Qian about number 5? Could it be that Su Qian knows the secrets of the Tiandi society? Su Qian's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought, damn, this old silver coin is trying to set me up. He immediately feigned ignorance and asked, Taoist, what are you talking about? By the way, Taoist, why aren't you riding the cat today? The burly, tall Lu Jisheng's eyes widened. He looked over with great curiosity. Even the Taoist's face immediately darkened. He thought, is this young man really so vengeful? He calmly said, Number 5 is the serial number of the Earthbook fragment holder. You should be aware of that. It was far back then, thanks to you. By the way, what happened to your cat? Su Qian laughed twice. Nothing. I must have remembered wrong. Then the two exchanged a look. Both nodded in satisfaction. After all, everyone was willing to back off a little. No harm done. Chu Yuanjin first looked at the two of them, then glanced at Heng Yuan. He asked, is this Heng Yuan master the one that Sangong saved on time? Heng Yuan nodded and said, yes, thanks to Lord Su back then. Chu Yuanjin smiled without speaking. So Su Qian knows about the Tiandi society and the Earthbook fragments. In that case, I'm even more certain of a guess. Taoist Jinlian, though he gave the Earthbook fragment to Su Xianyan, actually wants both of them. No wonder I saw through his plan. Gold. Taoist Jinlian took the Earthbook fragment and gave it to Su Xianyan, but he actually wants both. No wonder I figured out Taoist Jinlian's plan. I knew it. I'm the only one who can see through his schemes. The group arrived at the outer courtyard. Chu Yuanjin patted his back. The inner treasure, the ritual tool, flew out, sword and scabbard together. Suspend. Taoist Jinlian took out a paper crane from his chest. He gently tossed the paper crane forward. The paper crane instantly transformed into a large bird, 7 feet in length. It circled in the air. Su Qian quickly indicated he wanted to join the Taoist. This fool will be suspended. Chu Yuanjin has a standing ticket. Taoist Jinlian has a seat ticket. The sword scabbard from Chu Yuanjin's moon sword flew out. It made a whooshing sound as it shot into the sky. After Su Qian and Taoist Jinlian sat on the white crane, they realized there wasn't enough space. Finally, there was no more room. Su Qian asked the girl below, can sorcerers fly? Zhongli shook his head. No, teleportation arrays require a 4th grade practitioner to cast. At that moment, Taoist Jinlian took off his hairpin and the hairpin slowly grew larger in front of him. Zhongli jumped onto it. With a whoosh, it shot into the sky. Following closely was Chu Yuanjin's flying sword. Su Qian cursed inwardly. He looked at Taoist Jinlian. That old pervert is going to ruin my plans. I was going to let him sit on my lap. At this moment, Taoist Jinlian spoke. Last time, during the internal Tiandi society exchange, I could still sense it. The Earthbook fragment of number 5 was in the vicinity. But the next day, I suddenly lost the signal. I couldn't find its location. Su Qian's face slightly changed. He guessed. Could it be that number 5 encountered the Earth sect's demon cultivators? Taoist Jinlian nodded, indicating there was a possibility. Su Qian nodded. So you invited so many people to act together? Taoist, you seem to have a strong survival instinct. On the surface, you're a martial artist, but you're actually a practitioner of the Ren sect's Taoism. Chu Yuanjin, your real combat power should be at 4th grade. Even if you don't have a Tao, it's not far off. On the surface, you're from the Buddhist sect, but in reality, you're a martial artist. Number 6 Heng Yuan, your strength is hard to judge. After all, we haven't fought. There's little combat experience. Then there's Taoist Jinlian himself. I remember he was chased by the 4th grade Zilian. He fled all the way to the capital. Taoist Jinlian's level of power. It shouldn't be any stronger than 4th grade. Su Qian thought to himself, if it's just the Earth sect demon cultivators, then as long as they're below 3rd grade, we'll be as steady as a mountain. An hour later, Taoist Jinlian informed everyone that we were now in the area directly beneath us, a radius of about 50 miles. This should be where number 5 disappeared. I still can't sense the Earthbook fragment. The group descended through the clouds. They landed smoothly. Taoist Jinlian patted his belly, indicating that prolonged flight had drained his energy. He now needed to replenish it. Su Qian suggested cooking a meal here first. We can't search on an empty stomach. Who brought a pot? Chu Yuanjin said with a laugh. I did. Just as he was about to get up, he went into the nearby woods and retrieved an iron pot. But on second thought, since Su Qian already knows about the Earthbook fragment, there's no need to keep hiding it. So he took out the Earthbook fragment and retrieved the iron pot. The 4 of them built 2 bonfires, one for stewing soup and one for roasting food. Su Qian went and caught a few rabbits nearby, then asked with a smile, Thirsty? Does anyone have anything to drink? Lu Zhishan pulled out 2 jars of wine and handed them over with a grin. Taoist Jin Lian jokingly said, when traveling far and wide, there are 2 things you must always bring: pots, pans, and dishes, and toilet paper. Su Qian laughed. Yang Tsiping said, now there's a 3rd thing: funds. Chu Yuanjin immediately nodded in agreement. He thought to himself, Su Ningyan is really an interesting guy. Spending time with him is truly amusing. Su Qian smiled at him, silently considering that this Chu Yuanjin seemed flawless, but he couldn't give up. He had to find a way to trip him up at least once. Before long, a pot of fresh meat soup was ready. The group joked and laughed while enjoying the food, not feeling as though anything was lacking. Once they were all full, Taoist Jin Lian let out a long, satisfied breath. He marveled at how pleasant the moment was, but in the next instant, his expression froze. He said solemnly, by the way, where is the seer? Upon hearing this, Su Qian suddenly stood up. He thought, right, where's Zhongli? I remember he was next to me when we landed. Then somehow I just forgot about him. Taoist Jin Lian said seriously, stop wasting time. Let's all search for him together. This is more urgent than finding number 5. Number 5 might be fine, but if something happens to the seer, it could be too late. The uninitiated asked nervously, what do you mean? Su Qian made a cutting motion across his neck, making it perfectly clear. The 4 of them, each heading in a different direction to search. 15 minutes later, Taoist Jin Lian found Zhongli. He had fallen into a deep pit when landing, and the woman just sat there in the pit, motionless. Su Qian rushed over and asked, Miss, are you all right? Zhongli, with her back to him, sat hugging her knees, her shoulders slumped. Her silhouette looked lonely. Su Qian apologized and explained, I honestly didn't mean to forget about you. Please don't be angry, okay? I just accidentally forgot. That's all. After much coaxing and apologizing, they finally managed to convince her to drop her tantrum and return to camp. Master, that pit was surrounded by no danger. Why didn't you climb out yourself? Zhongli softly replied, it wasn't dangerous for you. Based on my past experiences, in situations like this, the safest approach is to stay put and wait for rescue. If I tried to come out, I might face all kinds of crises. A meteor falling from the sky, or maybe a passing demon or a malevolent cultivator. Bad luck can't be predicted, nor can it be divined. It can happen at any time. Before he could finish speaking, the campfire suddenly snapped and sparked, sending a burst of embers that set Zhongli's hair alight. Heng Yuan's face changed, and he instinctively grabbed the pot of boiling soup, ready to douse Zhongli with it. Luckily, Su Qian reacted quickly, stepping in front of her, and deflecting the scalding soup with a sweep of his martial force. Zhongli cowered behind Su Qian, trembling. The scene fell silent. Heng Yuan, clearly shaken, explained, I saw her hair catch fire and acted without thinking. No one blamed him, not even Zhongli. After all, the misfortune seemed to have unknowingly affected those nearby. Heng Yuan chanted a prayer, saying, there may be 1,000 Buddhist lamps, but none can illuminate the darkness around you. Amitabha. Taoist Jin Lian and Chu Yuanjin also clasped their hands together and chanted, Amitabha. Su Qian thought sarcastically, you're a senior Taoist. Why are you reciting Buddhist prayers? At this moment, Zhongli spoke up. When I landed earlier, I noticed something off about the feng shui nearby. There's a large tomb beneath the southern mountains. Hearing this, everyone turned to look toward the southern range. In the darkness, the mountains stood silently, huddled together, their outlines resembling a blossoming lotus. Su Qian asked, can any of you make sense? Chu Yuanjin shook his head, indicating he had no idea. Su Qian twitched his mouth. If you don't understand it, why were you staring so intently? You're all better at pretending than I am. Taoist Jin Lian frowned. I don't understand feng shui either, but I do know a thing or two about the flow of geomancy. Even if that range is a feng shui treasure, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a large tomb. At this moment, Zhongli's eyes gleamed green. Observing the terrain, she said, the tomb has been excavated. It's emitting like a blooming lotus. The main peak faces east, receiving purple energy. Behind it is a river. There are likely underground streams beneath. There's dark water nourishing its base. It's a 3 blossoms atop terrain. If there's iron or in the mountains, then all 5 elements are present. Su Qian asked, all 5 elements are present. So what? Zhongli replied, someone who chose such a feng shui treasure is definitely not an ordinary person. There might be valuable treasures inside the tomb. Su Qian looked at the Taoist and asked, I'm really curious. Apart from the sorcerer faction, the other systems don't understand feng shui. So who chose this tomb site? Jin Lian, who answered all questions, replied, besides the sorcerers, witches know a bit about feng shui. The Taoist sects also understand some. My Earth sect doesn't study this sort of thing, but the Heaven sect and Ren sect Taoists have some knowledge. To be precise, the Heaven sect, by reaching high levels of cultivation and merging with nature, can sense all things and thus naturally gain this ability. Ren sect cultivators rely on emperors to practice, so they actively study feng shui. Still, None are as skilled as sorcerers. He then gazed at the distant mountains and said, this tomb may contain a treasure, but it also comes with great dangers. Let's find the person first. Exploring the tomb can wait. Hung Yuan wholeheartedly agreed. The deceased have no need for further disturbances. Su Qian was deeply relieved. Everyone has a strong survival instinct. They're truly reassuring teammates. No troublemakers, no unnecessary issues. Even Zhongli seemed a bit disappointed, but he knew that this was the end of the matter. The group then discussed how to search for the person, and decided on a three-pronged approach. First, Su Qian would use his position as a night watchman to mobilize government constables or local militia for a search. Second, Taoist Jin Lian and Chu Yuanjin would fly and search the towns and villages surrounding the main city. Lastly, Master Hung Yuan would search among the local wanderers and common folk in the city for information. Taoist Jin Lian noted, Number 5 is from the southern borderlands, with distinctive features. She's cute and delicate looking. Anyone who's seen her should remember her. Su Qian took some silver shards from his purse and handed them to Master Hung Yuan. When looking for information, money works best. Fists come second. Master Hung Yuan, you might try using both. As dawn broke, Su Qian took Zhongli into the city. Xiangzhou administers 8 prefectures and 16 military counties. Xiangqing, the main city, has a population of over 500,000. It's not on par with the capital, but still considered a first-tier city. In the Yamen of Xiangqing, Su Qian, using his silver sash badge, approached the Xiangzhou prefect. He spoke directly. I need to find a young, beautiful woman from the southern border. She's easy to recognize. I'd like you, prefectly, to mobilize your staff to search. Once you have any information, post an announcement at the city gates. I'll check it myself. Prefectly assured him, Lord Su, rest assured, I'll take care of it. Satisfied, Su Qian nodded, and continued asking, has anything unusual happened in the Xiangqing area recently? Any strange individuals fighting nearby? Prefectly thought for a moment, then shook his head. Nothing like that. After Su Qian left, Prefectly called for his deputy and relayed the instruction. The deputy, realizing it was a thankless task, considered avoiding it. Isn't this like finding a needle in a haystack? Sure, people from the southern border look distinctive, but Xiangqing is huge. How can we find her? Prefectly waved him off. We can't refuse a request from the capital's silver sash. Just go through the motions. At that moment, an older official frowned and asked, is that official's surname Su? Prefectly nodded. The senior official continued, Silver Sash Su Qian. He's the one who represented the astronomical sword in a duel a few days ago. He's a rising star in the court right now. We absolutely can't offend him. Prefectly sucked in a breath. This is a big deal. Start the search immediately, he instructed. Make sure it's thorough. The deputy nodded repeatedly. Understood. I'll do my best. As the sun rose, Su Qian and Zhongli wandered the city, asking martial artists and townsfolk for clues, but found nothing. By all accounts, if Number 5 truly encountered the Earth Sect demon cultivators, her situation was likely dire. But Taoist Jin Lian still brought us to the brothel, which suggests he believes Number 5 could have escaped from the Earth Sect demon cultivators. With this thought in mind, Su Qian took Zhongli into a brothel to inquire. After half a day, parched and hungry, he suggested, let's go inside, rest a bit, and have something to eat and drink. Zhongli hesitated for a moment, then followed him in. The attendants in green robes warmly welcomed them, leading Su Qian and Zhongli toward the main hall. Su Qian, familiar with the place, directed them upstairs, to the best private room, and ordered some leeks and fresh fruits. The attendant responded promptly, though he couldn't help but glance curiously at Zhongli. As he turned away, this guy even brought a woman to the brothel? He sure knows how to have fun. Shortly after, the manager approached and asked, guests, would you like to have a few performers join you? Su Qian replied coolly, no need, you can leave. As Zhongli ate, she quietly asked, who exactly are you looking for? Su Qian wasn't worried about the tool person revealing his secrets. He answered, someone from a secret organization. That organization was founded by Earth Sect's Taoist Jin Lian. Suddenly, Zhongli said, his primordial spirit is incomplete. Su Qian chuckled. What do you mean? Zhongli abruptly changed the subject, saying, just like the woman who favored you in the cult, her primordial spirit doesn't align with her physical body. Not fully catching her point, Su Qian nodded absent-mindedly, murmuring a perfunctory response. Zhongli then asked, the artifact in your possession, is it the Earth Book? Su Qian nodded. Technically, it's a fragment of the Earth Book. Zhongli said, the Earth Book is an ancient treasure. It's said to date back to the ancient Renhuang era, a magical artifact shaped by the heavens and earth. But it was later shattered. Su Qian's interest was piqued. How did it break? Zhongli explained. One of the astronomical swords has a treasure compendium, specifically recording information on all the magical artifacts in the 9 provinces. It was compiled personally by teacher Jianzheng. I heard teacher Jianzheng mention it. He speculated it might have been broken by the Dao Crown. Su Qian thought to himself that this artifact was critical. It was key to Taoist Jin Lian's plan to restore order. If it fell into the hands of the Earth sect's demon cultivators, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, no one could be sure of reclaiming an Earth book fragment from a second-grade Taoist. With a lesson from Zilian, this time the demon cultivators would likely hide the fragment. If they couldn't retrieve the fragment, Taoist Jin Lian's plan would mostly fall apart. At that moment, Li Miaozhen sent a transmission. I'm planning to head to Jiangzhou to investigate a case. Afterward, I'll travel to the capital, dealing with evildoers along the way. The duel will be delayed for a few days, but I'll come to the capital after that. Chu Yuanjin had a hunch. The duel after the delay, that's 20 days from now. It's not too late. Li Miaozhen might be on the verge of a breakthrough, which is why she keeps postponing. If she succeeds in reaching the 4th grade, it will surely be a life and death battle. Chu Yuanjin responded. Number 5 has encountered trouble. She disappeared in Xiangzhou. Taoist Jin Lian has lost the connection to her Earth book fragment. It's very likely she's been captured by Earth sect's demon cultivators. Li Miaozhen replied quickly. Are you certain she was taken by demon cultivators? Are you all in Xiangzhou? I'll head over immediately. Poor girl. What were the elders of her southern tribal family thinking? Sending an inexperienced girl to a foreign land, without any protection? Typical southerners. If she encountered the Earth, there must have been a fight. Ask the local authorities for help. Also gather information from the commoners. Su Qian watched as Li Miaozhen flooded the channel with messages, and grumbled to himself. This number 2 is like a nagging old lady, going on and on. We get that you're anxious, but calm down first. Then Taoist Jin Lian sent another message to number 2. You don't need to come. It's pointless. Nos. 4 and 6 are already in Xiangzhou. A few seconds later, Taoist Jin Lian sent another message. Do what you can and accept the rest as fate. From his words, one could sense his helplessness. For a moment, everyone in the Heaven and Earth Society felt heavy-hearted. They were worried about the artifact falling into the demon cultivator's hands, and for number 5's safety. Suddenly, Su Qian chuckled. The Taoist didn't even mention me. Seems my cat died. He continued. See? People shouldn't have quirks. Once people know about your quirks, it becomes a handle they can grab onto. He turned to Zhongli and asked, Are you full? Zhongli nodded obediently. Su Qian smiled mysteriously. I have a bold idea. Zhongli hesitated. I have a bad feeling about this. I suggest you keep that bold idea to yourself. A few minutes later, a timid 5th senior sister of the astronomical sword was pulled into the street by Su Qian. Su Qian said, Just point us in a clear direction. Use your seer abilities. I think you might be able to help us find a clue. Zhongli cautioned. Based on my experience, even if you find a clue, it often leads to an even worse outcome. Su Qian dismissed her concern. But don't forget, I'm someone with great fortune. I can offset some of your bad luck. Zhongli was persuaded. She was naturally gentle and lacked assertiveness. She lowered her head. In her eyes, strange patterns seemed to freeze within a clear, bright glow. A few seconds later, an eerie voice spoke. Go 3 miles south, and you'll find the clue we need. The young man in green robes looked panicked. As soon as the words were spoken, he collapsed in exhaustion. Fortunately, Su Qian quickly caught him. Zhongli explained. A seer can only predict once per day. Afterward, the misfortune escalates. If I go another day, without extraordinary fortune or a special array, I can't continue. I won't survive another 2 hours. Su Qian silently complained. Seers are plagued with misfortune by nature. Revealing the secrets of heaven just invites heavenly punishment. Thinking of Jianjing's methods, he felt that the entire sorcerer system was tailor-made for scheming masterminds, a group of plotting old coins in the shadows. At that moment, a carriage on the street suddenly ran out of control. No matter how the driver tried, he couldn't stop it or steer it away from pedestrians. The carriage barreled straight towards Su Qian and Zhongli. Su Qian's face darkened. Really? Isn't this a bit overkill? Even hanging yourself isn't this extreme. I just mentioned it, and here it comes. Su Qian looked at the Taoist and asked, I'm quite curious. Aside from sorcerers, other systems don't understand feng shui. So who picked this tomb site? Taoist Jin Lian, always willing to answer, replied. Besides sorcerers, witches know a little about feng shui. Taoist sects also have some knowledge. My Earth sect doesn't study this. But the Heaven sect and Ren sect Taoists have some to be precise, Heaven sect cultivators reach a level where they harmonize with nature and can sense all things, gaining this ability naturally. Ren sect cultivators depend on emperors, so they actively study feng shui. Still, they're not as skilled as sorcerers. He then looked at the distant mountains and said, This tomb may hold a treasure, but it also carries great danger. Let's find the person first. We'll worry about the tomb later. Heng Yuan agreed. There's no need to disturb the deceased. Su Qian felt relieved. Everyone's survival instinct is strong. They're all reliable teammates. No troublemakers, just a smooth group. Only Zhongli seemed a bit down, but he knew the matter was closed. The group discussed how to search for the person and decided on 3 approaches. First, Su Qian would use his night watchman status to mobilize government officers or local militia for the search. Second, Daoist Jinlian and Chu Yuanjin, using their flight abilities, would search the towns and villages around the main city. Finally, Master Heng Yuan would gather information from martial artists and commoners in the city. Daoist Jinlian said, "Number 5 is from the southern borderlands, with distinctive features. She's cute and delicate. Anyone who's seen her should remember her." Su Qian took some silver shards from his purse and handed them to Master Heng Yuan. To gather information, money works best. Fists come second. Master Heng Yuan, you might try using both. As dawn broke, Su Qian took Zhongli into the city. Xiangzhou governs 8 prefectures and 16 counties. Xiangqing, the main city, has a population of over 500,000. It can't compare to the capital, but it's still a first-tier city. In the government office of Xiangqing, Su Qian, using his silver sash badge, met with the Xiangzhou prefect. Su spoke directly. "I'm looking for a young woman from the southern border. She's beautiful and easily recognizable. I'd like you to mobilize your men to search for her. If there's any news, post an announcement at the city gates. Once I see it, I'll take care of the rest." The prefect replied, "Rest assured, Lord Su, I'll carry out your request." Satisfied, Su Qian nodded, and then asked, "Has anything unusual happened in Xiangqing recently? Have there been any strange battles in the area?" The prefect thought for a moment, then shook his head. "None that I know of." After Su Qian left, the prefect called for his deputy and relayed the instructions. The deputy, hearing this was a thankless task, considered refusing. "Isn't this like looking for a needle in a haystack? Sure, people from the southern border have distinct features, but Xiangqing is huge. How can we find her?" The prefect waved him off. "The capital's silver sash has asked this of us. We can't refuse. Just go through the motions." At that moment, an older official frowned and asked, "Is that official's surname Su?" The prefect nodded. The senior official continued, "Silver Sash Su Qian. He's the one who recently represented the astronomical sword in a duel. He's currently highly favored in court. We absolutely cannot offend him." The prefect gasped. Realizing this was a major figure, "Begin the search immediately," he ordered. "Make sure it's done thoroughly." The deputy nodded repeatedly. "Understood. I'll do my best." As the sun rose higher, Su Qian and Zhongli wandered through the city, asking martial artists for information, but they found nothing. Logically speaking, if number 5 really encountered the Earth sect's demon cultivators, the outcome didn't look good. But Daoist Jinlian still took us to patrol the area, showing that he believes Wu Hao could escape from the Earth sect demon cultivators. With that thought in mind, Su Qian took Zhongli into a brothel to inquire. After half a day of hunger and thirst, he said, "Let's go inside and rest for a bit, grab some water and food." Zhongli hesitated, but eventually followed him in. The attendants in green robes warmly greeted them, leading Su Qian and Zhongli toward the main hall. Su Qian, familiar with the place, instructed, "Go to the second floor, find the best private room, and prepare some leeks and fruit." The attendant nodded repeatedly. As he turned to leave, he glanced curiously at Zhongli, thinking, bringing a woman to a brothel? This guy's pretty bold. Before long, the manager arrived and asked, "Would you like some performers to join you?" Su Qian calmly replied, "No, we don't need any. You may leave." As Zhongli ate, she softly asked, "Who exactly are you looking for?" Su Qian wasn't concerned about the tool exposing his privacy. He replied, "A member of a secret organization. That organization was founded by Daoist Jinlian of the Earth sect." Zhongli suddenly said, "His primordial spirit is incomplete." Su Qian chuckled. "What do you mean?" Zhongli abruptly changed the subject. "Just like the girl in the teaching square who was fond of you. Her primordial spirit doesn't align with her physical body." Su Qian wasn't paying full attention, so he absent and gave a perfunctory hum. Zhongli then asked, "The artifact you're holding, is it the Earth Book?" Su Qian nodded. "Strictly speaking, it's a fragment of the Earth Book." Zhongli said, "The Earth Book is an ancient treasure. It's said to date back to the ancient Renhuang era. It's an artifact blessed by the heavens and the earth, but it was shattered later." Su Qian grew interested. "How did it break?" Zhongli explained. "The astronomical swords have a treasure compendium that records the information of magical artifacts from across the 9 provinces. It was personally compiled by Jianjing himself. I heard Jianjing mention it. He guessed that it must have been shattered by Dao Zun." Su Qian thought to himself that this artifact was very important. It was crucial to Daoist Jinlian's plan to clean house. If it fell into the hands of the Earth sect demon cultivators, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, no one could confidently snatch the Earth Book fragment from a second-rank Daoist master. With the lesson from Purple Lotus in mind, the demon cultivators would likely take the Earth Book fragment and hide away. Without retrieving the Earth Book fragment, Daoist Jinlian's plan would be mostly doomed. At that moment, Li Miaozhen sent a message. "I plan to go to Jiangzhou to investigate a case. Afterward, I'll head to the capital, purging evil along the way. The contest between heaven and man can be postponed for a few days. I'll come to the capital after it's over." Yu Yuanjin had a vague hunch. After the contest, That would be 20 days later. Not too late. Li Miaojin was likely preparing for a breakthrough. That's why she kept postponing it. If she successfully broke through to the 4th rank, it would surely be a life and death struggle. Chu Yuanjin replied. Number 5 has gone missing. He disappeared in Xiangzhou. Taoist Jin Lian has lost the connection with number 5's Earthbook fragment. It's highly likely he was taken by Earth Sect demon cultivators. Li Miaojin sent another message. Are you sure he was taken by Earth Sect demon cultivators? Are you all in Xiangzhou? I'll come over right away. How could this girl be so unlucky? What were the elders of the southern border tribes thinking? Sending a naive young girl to a foreign country without any protection. Typical tribal behavior. If she did encounter Earth Sect demon cultivators in Xiangzhou, there must have been a battle. Ask the local authorities for help and inquire among the common folk. Su Qian looked at Li Miaojin's flood of messages and grumbled. Why does number 2 sound like a nagging old mother, always going on and on? Everyone knows you're anxious, but calm down. This is what Taoist Jinlian transmitted. Number 2, you don't need to come over. It's meaningless. Numbers 4 and 6 are also in play. A few seconds later, Taoist Jinlian transmitted again, doing his best, leaving everything to fate. Anyone reading his words could see his helplessness. For a moment, the members of the Heaven and Earth Society felt heavy-hearted, worried about the treasure falling into the hands of the demonic path, and concerned for number 5's safety. Suddenly, Su Qian chuckled. The Taoist didn't even mention me. It seems my identity as a cat Taoist really makes him wary. You see, people shouldn't have peculiar habits. If you do, and let others know, it becomes a handle they can hold against you. Then he looked at Zhongli and asked, are you full? Zhongli nodded obediently. Su Qian smiled mysteriously. I have a bold idea. Zhongli grew wary. I have a bad feeling about this, so I suggest you keep your bold ideas to yourself. A few minutes later, a trembling seer watched as her 5th elder sister was pulled into the street by Su Qian. Su Qian said, just point out a bright path. Using your prophetic ability, I think we might find some clues that way. Zhongli cautioned, in my experience, even if we find clues, it will ultimately lead to a worse outcome. Su Qian brushed it off, saying, but don't forget, I'm someone with great fortune. I can offset some of your bad luck. Zhongli was persuaded. She was a gentle and obedient girl, lacking strong opinions. She lowered her head. Her pupils reflected a peculiar, frozen pattern of light. A few seconds later, a slightly hollow voice came. Head 3 miles south, and we'll find the clues we need. A man in a green robe looked terrified. As soon as the words fell, he collapsed from weakness. Luckily, Su Qian quickly caught him. Zhongli said, a prophet can only make one prediction a day, and then misfortune escalates. At that moment, without great fortune or a special formation, I won't survive more than 2 hours. Su Qian grumbled to himself. Prophets are naturally plagued by bad luck. Revealing the secrets of heaven just invites disaster. Thinking about Jin Zheng's approach to handling things, it felt like these warlocks, this entire system, were born conspirators, the ultimate schemers operating from the shadows. At that moment, a carriage in the street suddenly lost control. No matter how the driver tried, he couldn't stop the carriage or avoid pedestrians. It charged straight at Su Qian. His face darkened. Wasn't this a bit too ruthless? Even hanging yourself wouldn't be this bold. I just mentioned it, and here it comes. Su Qian walked at the front. He lit the prepared torch. Qian Yu said, this tunnel, we worked on it for nearly 3 months before entering. The main purpose was to get the air flowing. Su Qian thought to himself, too much air flowing in will ruin the artifacts in the tomb. Some things deteriorate quickly once exposed to oxygen. The group took a few steps forward. Suddenly, Su Qian stepped on something hard. He thought it was silver again, but when he picked it up, he discovered it was a brick. And the brick's hardness was far beyond what he had expected. Chu Yuan checked the surroundings and said, I've read about this kind of brick in books. It's a rare type of stone called Qinggang brick. It's known for its durability and resistance to weathering. Su Qian nodded. We must be at the edge of the great tomb. Judging by these bricks, the entire tomb must be constructed from Qinggang bricks. The tomb's owner must be more prestigious than we imagined. Chu Yuan was stunned. He thought, no wonder he's a prodigy at solving cases. His thinking is agile. His reasoning is formidable. At this point, Qin Yu pointed ahead and said, up ahead is the first burial chamber. I only followed the leader this far. Without hesitation, the group entered the tomb, searched around inside, and found 12 coffins and 4 corpses. The corpses had been dead for days, their bodies emitting a foul stench of rotten eggs. Qian's heart sank. 3 of them were gang brothers, and the other was a hired expert. To face such danger so soon after entering the tomb, how were the others doing? Su Qian crouched down to examine the bodies. Their faces were dark blue, their lips black. They had died from severe poisoning. Zhongli said, there's no poisonous gas in the air. Su Qian nodded. He noticed that this corpse's arm had a few small wounds, like it had been bitten by some kind of insect. Suddenly, Chu Yuan said he could hear insects crawling inside the stone coffin. It seemed these people had touched something they shouldn't have, and were bitten and poisoned as a result. Meng Yuan looked at Chu Yuan. Should we open the coffin and take a look? he suggested. The young scholar calmed his mind, gathered his energy, and flicked his finger, sending a force into the stone coffin. The sound of crawling insects inside abruptly stopped. Hung Yuan stepped forward, lifted the coffin lid, and a foul stench wafted out. Fortunately, they had taken anti-poison pills before entering the tomb. The 4 members of the Heaven and Earth Society stood by the coffin, examining it. Inside, besides the poisoned insects that Chu Yuan had killed, there was a heavily deformed skeleton. Its exact age was impossible to determine. Su Qian humbly asked Chu Yuan, if there aren't any burial goods, then these coffins must belong to the accompanying burials. But as far as I know, the Defying dynasty didn't have a tradition of burying the living, right? Chu Yuan immediately replied, burial of the living has existed since ancient times. The earliest instances can't be dated accurately. However, the practice wasn't officially abolished until the year 2123, during the Dai dynasty, Su Qian said. Wasn't that before the Confucian sage appeared? In other words, this tomb must be over 2,000 years old. At that moment, a coffin behind Zhongli made a strange noise. He initially thought it was just more poisonous insects, but the sound wasn't quite the same. Suddenly, a withered hand pushed open the lid, and fingernails scraped against the coffin's interior with a chilling screech. Then several other coffins burst open at once, and a few shriveled corpses roared and lunged at them. Su Qian felt a chill run down his spine. What's going on with these zombies? I thought it was the filth gods who controlled corpses. Could this tomb be related to them? Zhongli shook his head. These zombies have nothing to do with the filth gods, he explained. They've been nourished by an energy over a long period and have turned into zombies, Zhongli explained. Hung Yuan's temper flared. He recited a Buddhist chant and strode forward, directly confronting the zombies. With a single punch, he smashed a zombie's head. Su Qian suddenly stopped feeling scared. It was as if these poisonous insects and zombies couldn't harm him at all. Suddenly, he felt like a max-level player strolling through the newbie zone. After dealing with the zombies, they found murals on the walls, on either side of the burial chamber. Taoist Jinlian examined them for a moment and began to explain. These murals depict history. The Tao master, revered as the ancestor of all techniques, was incredibly learned. Among the teachings passed down through his Taoist scrolls, the 3 great sects, heaven, earth, and man, took prominence, but there were many other minor branches. One branch focused on dual cultivation, the blending of yin and yang, to seek the great Tao together. At its peak, it was as influential as the heaven, earth, and man sections. It drew countless followers. Prominent officials and wealthy elites, yearning for longevity, treated them as honored guests. Some female followers lingered in Taoist temples, willingly joining in dual cultivation. According to the records of the imperial sect, this even included women of high status. Su Qian couldn't help but admire. This branch really knew how to have fun, huh? However, he realized that the murals depicted the meridians for dual cultivation. Quickly, he recorded them. The scholar commented, this method is beneficial for cultivation progress, but finding a suitable partner is very difficult. For dual cultivation, one must find a woman who is also well-versed in this path. It's not as simple as picking someone from a brothel. Taoist Jinlian continued, heaven and earth, yin and yang, transform into the 5 elements. Dual cultivation is a legitimate path that leads directly to the Tao. However, while the techniques themselves are impartial, people differ. Dual cultivation progress is slow, and one must maintain a pure heart, without succumbing to desires. Gradually, this sect, seeking quicker progress, developed a technique of absorption within dual cultivation. This led them down a dark path. They deceived female practitioners, imprisoning them in jars and forcibly extracting energy. They even plundered women from all over, inciting widespread outrage. Su Qian frowned. That's going too far. Taoist Jinlian sighed. Yes, in the end, they provoked the wrath of both the court's army and martial heroes, leading to their complete eradication. Now, only fragments of dual cultivation techniques remain in the Taoist canon, but they're of little use. Who would have thought there'd be a complete version here? This sect had once been revered by powerful figures, so it's clear the owner of this tomb must have been an avid devotee of dual cultivation. At this point, Taoist Jinlian remarked, to see this long-lost dual cultivation technique in my lifetime, it makes this trip worthwhile. Su Qian joked, Taoist, you're celibate. This dual cultivation technique is useless to you, right? Taoist Jinlian's face darkened at the comment. Su Qian silently noted down the dual cultivation technique from the murals, and quickly urged, we need to find number 5 as soon as possible. And so the group continued their search. Qian Yu had listened in on a temptation hard for any man to resist, especially someone like Qian Yu. If he could master this technique, he wouldn't need to risk his life for money anymore. He quietly fell back a few steps, waiting until Su Qian and the others were out of sight. Then, he turned around and returned to the murals. Holding a torch, Qian Yu retraced his steps. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridors, but gradually, he sensed something was off. He had walked quite a distance, yet still hadn't found his way back to the murals. Holding the torch high, he searched frantically. The surroundings were empty, eerily so. There were no murals, not even the corpses on the ground. Cold sweat poured from Qian Yu's forehead. His teeth chattered, and his voice trembled as he called out, "Heroes, are you there? Can you hear me?" The sound echoed in the empty corridor, distorting as it bounced back, so that when it reached his ears again, it sounded like someone else calling out. A chill ran down Qian Yu's spine, and the hair on his neck stood on end. He turned and began sprinting back, hoping to catch up with Su Qian and the others. But alas, no matter how long he ran, he didn't see anyone. Suddenly, Qian Yu tripped and fell hard to the ground, letting out a muffled groan. Terrified, he grabbed his torch, casting light on what he had stumbled over. It was a corpse. To be precise, half a corpse. Only the upper body remained, the lower half severed and missing. The wound was a grotesque mess of flesh and blood. Qian Yu let out a startled cry, scrambling backward in terror. Such evil, such horrific evil. Just then, he heard a faint voice from behind, calling his name. "Qian Yu, is that you?" Terror exploded in his heart. His face instantly turned pale. Meanwhile, Su Qian and the others, torches in hand, had walked ahead for a while. When Chu Yuan furrowed his brow and said, "Are we missing someone?" As he spoke, they turned to look back. Hung Yuan's eyes narrowed. "Qian Yu is gone. When did he disappear?" "I didn't notice at all," he admitted. Su Qian frowned. "My divine sense hasn't been affected, which means no hostile force has targeted me. He wasn't abducted. But why didn't any of us notice when he left?" Chu Yuan's expression turned grave as he analyzed. "Not just that, one set of footsteps is missing, and none of us realized it. That's already unusual," Su Qian remarked. Daoist Jinlian had a sudden thought. He took out a fragment of the Earth Book and examined it. Frowning, he said, "The Earth Book fragment isn't working. Maybe number 5 experienced something similar." At that moment, Zhongli spoke up. "I think I know where we are. To be precise, I understand our situation now. Generally speaking," he continued, "a tomb is structured in 3 layers: inner, middle, and outer. The innermost layer is the main burial chamber, where the tomb's owner rests. The middle layer often contains side chambers, or passageways, reserved for significant figures buried alongside the owner. The outermost layer serves as the tomb's defenses. We're currently in the outer layer, which is also the most dangerous part. It's filled with mechanisms, traps, and arrays. If I'm not mistaken," he added, "we stepped into an array as soon as we entered that mural chamber." Su Qian was at a loss for words. "If it's such an important clue, why didn't you say so earlier?" Zhongli lowered his head, feeling wronged. "I forgot. I don't know why I forgot." Looking at the pitiful Zhongli, all 4 men fell silent. They didn't have the heart to blame him further. Daoist Jinlian asked, "What kind of formation is this? Can you tell?" Zhongli replied, "It appears to be a bewilderment formation. The layout of this underground palace matches its pattern. We're inside a massive maze. We must find the right path to escape. Otherwise, we'll be trapped here forever." Daoist Jinlian asked anxiously, "Then, do you have a way to lead us out?" Zhongli lowered his head even further. "Even though I recognize it's a bewilderment formation, I can't lead the way. Otherwise, I might end up leading you to a dead end." Su Qian sighed inwardly. What an unlucky prophet. Was Jianzhang like this too? I really wish I could have seen him in his cave. Chu Yuan furrowed his brow. "If we can't break the formation through conventional means, then the best option is to break it by force. Just like how Su Qian cut through that sorcerer's spell with 2 strikes. Daoist Jinlian dismissed the suggestion. "Until we figure out the identity of the tomb's owner, we'd best not do that. Moreover, the outer layer of this tomb is constructed entirely of Qingyang stone. Such extravagance was rare even in ancient times, and even the current Defying dynasty can't afford that much diamond stone. What's more, the dual cultivation technique of the ancient sect was their most closely guarded secret, not something they'd casually reveal. Yet this tomb holds the complete text. All signs point to this being no ordinary tomb. Breaking the formation recklessly might have unpredictable consequences. For now, finding a safe way out of this maze is a more cautious approach." Hung Yuan's brows knitted together. He was a warrior monk and didn't understand such things. Chu Yuan practiced swordsmanship. Although he came from a scholarly background, he also didn't understand formations. And Su Ningyan, being a simple warrior, was even less likely to help. Daoist Jinlian spoke up. "The Daoist sects don't specialize in feng shui, but we do have some knowledge of formations. I can try to guide you through." But after just 15 minutes, Daoist Jinlian's expression turned. Daoist Jinlian stared stiffly into the dark abyss ahead, his brow furrowed, saying nothing. He had failed to find the way. Hung Yuan, sensing his doubt, tried to console him. "Daoist, you need not blame yourself. Even though you didn't lead us out, we still made it back to our starting point. We can always try again." Su Qian nearly laughed at that, thinking to himself, "Daoist, you're as useless as a second-rate product." Chu Yuan silently regretted his earlier carelessness. He thought, if I had only taken the time to research this site's history, or consulted the ancient records, I could have uncovered clues about the tomb's layout before even entering it. Our team is so strong that even a fourth-rank expert would think twice before engaging us. Perhaps that's why I got overconfident and sloppy. Daoist Jinlian let out a sigh and turned to Zhongli. What are your thoughts? He asked. You don't need to tell me your decision. Just explain the secrets of this formation. Zhongli pondered. This kind of formation often relies on psychological cues and illusions. Without those, the entrant would only need to orient themselves to easily find the right path. In the absence of clear direction, escaping the formation depends entirely on the entrant's experience and judgment. If my judgment is clouded by even a moment's doubt, it could lead to even bigger problems. Amid the tense atmosphere, Zhongli added quietly, I do have one more reliable method. Daoist Jinlian asked urgently, what is it? Tell me quickly. Zhongli reached out and poked Su Qian, suggesting, if we let him lead, we could find our way out. Most likely. All eyes turned to Su Qian, their gazes shifting from Zhongli to him. Chu Yuan scrutinized him in disbelief, a flurry of thoughts flashing through his mind. After all, Chu Yuan thought, Su Ningyan is just a warrior. He can't possibly understand formations. Letting him break the formation would be worse than trying it myself. But this, 4 heavenly swords prophet, wouldn't make such a claim lightly. Does Su Ningyan possess a unique skill? Or does he carry some artifact that can break the formation? Thinking of this, Chu Yuan couldn't help but glance at Daoist Jinlian. To his surprise, the Daoist seemed to have a knowing expression. Could it be that Daoist Jinlian also knew some secret about Su Ningyan? I'm getting more and more curious about him. Hung Yuan, on the other hand, was more straightforward. He directly voiced his doubt. Master Su, do you understand formations? Su Qian twitched the corner of his mouth and shook his head decisively. No. At that moment, Qin Yu suddenly spun around, drew his weapon, and took a defensive stance. He squinted into the darkness ahead and called out, Who's there? State your name. Footsteps approached, drawing closer. At the edge of the torchlight's glow, a silhouette gradually became clear. It was a middle-aged man in his 40s, his face gaunt, his unkempt jawline covered in stubble, dark and bristly from neglect. He looked disheveled and haggard. Behind him, Qian Yu recognized several familiar faces, brothers from the Huta gang. The middle-aged man smiled and said, Qian Yu, I never thought I'd see you again. With that, he stepped forward. But Qian Yu's expression suddenly changed. He drew his weapon and pointed it at the group, his voice sharp and commanding, Don't move, or my blade won't spare anyone. How will you prove who you are? The middle-aged man gave an approving smile. Good, you're not being careless. It seems that encounter with the skin-clad corpse demon beneath Jingzhou 2 years ago left a lasting impression. Behind him, the gang members cursed angrily. Qian, why'd you stay above ground when you knew better? With your pitiful skills, you were just throwing your life away. But instead of getting angry, Qian Yu smiled, happy and eager. He approached, exclaiming, It's really you. But as he drew closer to the middle-aged man, Qian Yu suddenly threw a handful of cinnabar powder. The leader, caught off guard, inhaled some of it. Angered, he punched Qian Yu on the head, cursing, Damn it. This junk is only good against low-level spirits. It doesn't even work on zombies. At that, Qian Yu was finally convinced. No doubt, Chief, you're all right. That's really a relief. He held up his torch and examined everyone closely, even spotting a young woman from the southern border. Her once round face had thinned noticeably, and she appeared to have gone without sleep for some time, her expression revealing her exhaustion. After looking everyone over, he counted their numbers, his heart growing heavier. Originally, there had been 32 members. Now only 12 remained. Qian Yu took off the pack he carried on his back, handing out food to the others. You must be starving. I brought some food and water for you. As he distributed the food, he noticed that many of the gang members were injured. He asked the leader, What happened to you? The middle-aged man answered softly, We ran into trouble. This place is a maze. No matter how we tried, we couldn't get out. After I led the brothers down into the tomb, we entered a chamber full of zombies. We lost several brothers before we could destroy those evil creatures. We have Lena to thank for that. Without her, we would have lost even more lives. But after entering that chamber, we never made it out again. We've been wandering in circles for days, watching our food and water supplies dwindle. Because of this, arguments broke out between the gang and the hired experts. And that's not even the worst of it. One morning we woke up to find one of our brothers missing. From that day on, more brothers have disappeared each day without a trace. The whole team is gripped by fear. The experts we hired have started arguing with us. After a heated argument, they split up. Soon after, we discovered that everyone who left the group was dead. The bodies were in horrible shape, as if something had devoured them. It's some kind of monster, a very powerful one. It's hunting us, killing exactly 2 people every day. No more, no less. We fought it off twice now, thanks to Lena's help. Without her, you probably wouldn't have seen us again. But Lena's condition is worsening. Without food and water, we'll be in real trouble soon. By the way, the leader continued, How did you get down here? The initial tomb was full of poisonous bugs and zombies. How did you make it through? Hearing this, Qianyu immediately perked up. Chief, brothers, I brought reinforcements. Don't worry. We'll be out of here soon. The group was overjoyed. Is it the Gongsun clan from Xiangzhou's martial world? Or the Dragon God Fort by the Blackwater River? Qianyu shook his head. No, neither. It was pure luck. I happened to meet them by the roadside. They were also seeking an opportunity. Qianyu looked at the young southern border woman. Miss Lena. They came looking for you. Lena shook her head, indicating that she was alone. This is my first time here. No one from my Defying clan came along. Qianyu explained. The person I met is a 6th grade copperskin ironbone warrior. He looks very handsome, carrying a woman with disheveled hair. Before he could finish, Lena quickly shook her head, saying she didn't know him. Qianyu continued. Aside from that man and woman, there's also a burly monk, who looks quite fierce. There was also a swordsman in green, capable of flight, truly an immortal-like feat. Yet the young southern border girl still shook her head, saying she didn't know them. The leader frowned. Who exactly did you find for help? Are they reliable? Qianyu himself wasn't too sure anymore. But they were indeed looking for Lena, and specifically mentioned the southern border girl from Xiamu. With lingering doubts, Qianyu continued. Oh right, there was also a Taoist. The others called him Taoist Jianlian. Lena suddenly let out a scream of delight, her face lighting up. I know him. I know him. Taoist Jianlian is a trusted elder of mine. He's come to find me. Taoist Jianlian truly is a great person. Qianyu finally relaxed. So you know him. It seems that the one who actually knows Lena is Taoist Jianlian. The others must have been brought in by him. One of the gang members looked at him with shining eyes. Your friends, how strong are they? Can they really get us out of here? Lena, being straightforward by nature, answered truthfully. Taoist Jianlian is a master of the imperial sect. I don't know his exact rank, but he's much stronger than me. The bald monk is a martial monk from the Buddhist sects, also very powerful. As for the swordsman in green, his name is Chu Yuanshan. He's one of the key figures in the Heaven Man duel. He represented the benevolent sect against the Heaven sect Saintus. The crowd gasped, exclaiming. Qianyu coughed and asked leader, you mentioned a monster hunting you. What kind of monster? Fear flickered in the leader's eye. It looks like a giant lizard, but it's incredibly fast and completely silent, very difficult to deal with. At that moment, the silent darkness was disrupted by a faint, unusual sound. The leader instinctively stood and shouted, be careful, it's coming again. No sooner had he spoken than a shadow darted out of the darkness. A flick of its tongue coiled around a nearby Huta gang member, threatening to pull him away. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the floor tiles shattered as Lena shot forward like a cannonball. She rammed the shadow hard. As the creature was sent flying, its tongue coiled around Lena's ankle, yanking her hard. Lena slammed into a wall, causing it to crack. After the creature was flung away, it suddenly stopped moving, as if it had retreated. The leader quickly said, light the torches, keep watch on all sides. That creature strikes from the shadows. Meanwhile, Lena climbed out of the rubble. She remained on alert, her delicate face set in a grim expression. She carefully listened, scanning for any clues, then snatched a torch from Qianyu and hurled it toward a certain spot. In the flickering firelight, everyone saw it, a massive lizard-like creature clinging to the wall. Its gray-brown eyes sat on either side of its head, dull and lifeless-looking. It seemed barely sensitive to light. Qianyu saw the monster clearly for the first time. It was less than 10 feet long, its tail equal in length to its body, and covered in thick, keratinous scales. As the firelight illuminated it, the recently fed Lena displayed her tremendous power. Without a sound, she bent her knees and sprang. Before the sound of shattering tiles reached their ears, she vanished. The creature clinging to the wall sensed something was amiss. It wobbled slightly, preparing to flee. But Lena, with her extensive hunting experience in the southern border, quickly closed in. She let out a cry and slammed her fist into the creature's abdomen. Then, punch after punch rained down. Soon, only the creature's wails echoed in the tomb. Then, suddenly, the tomb fell silent. The leader cautiously called out, Lena? He tried to keep his voice steady as he called again, Lena. The oppressive silence yielded no response. Qianyu exclaimed in panic, Lena, did she? But then she emerged from the darkness, dragging the creature's corpse. A cheer erupted, and the members of the Huta gang wept tears of joy, shouting to release their pent-up frustration. The crisis that had tormented them for days was finally over. Lena tossed the creature's body before them. Grinning, she asked, can we eat this meat? The leader quickly interjected, Lena, we can't eat that. This thing grew in a tomb. It fed on poisonous creatures and rotting flesh. It's extremely toxic to us. Lena looked disappointed. Such a big piece of meat, what a waste. Just then, a shadow moved behind her. From the passageway, another massive lizard-like creature appeared, poised in a hunting stance. This one was 3 times larger than the first, but clearly of the same species. The leader felt a cold wind rush past, as though something incredibly fast had brushed by him. Then he realized Lena was gone. Behind him, the creature opened its massive jaws, about to bite down on the southern border girl's head, just as it seemed inevitable. Another figure darted out from the shadows, landing a powerful punch squarely on the creature's head. The impact halted its attempt to bite Lena, yet the creature reacted almost instantly. As soon as the punch landed, it swept sideways. The figure that struck was flung away just as quickly. At that moment, another figure, a man in green with a sword, charged into the fray. The surrounding flames seemed to take on a life of their own, suddenly surging and gathering at his fingertips. Then he flicked a spark that shot through the air, its fiery trail illuminating the darkness as it pierced the creature's head. At the same time, another figure darted out from behind the green-clad swordsman. It was a hulking monk, letting out a deep roar. He charged forward, raising a massive fist. A flurry of punches rained down like a storm. The creature writhed, then convulsed, until its brains spilled out, and it fell lifeless. At last, Golden Lotus Taoist stepped forward. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "We're here to rescue you." Qian Yu and the others cried out excitedly. "Thank you for saving our lives, Taoist." The Hutu gang members gazed at Golden Lotus Taoist in awe, sensing his calm demeanor and unfathomable depth, perfectly embodying the image of a peerless expert. Su Qian called out, "Taoist, how is your young companion?" Golden Lotus Taoist examined her carefully and replied, "She's just injured, but her life isn't in danger." He added to himself, "As long as her vital essence isn't harmed, even serious injuries can't kill someone with her potential." He then turned to Zhongli. "Miss Zhong, do you have any healing pills?" Zhongli nodded, pulling a pill from her coarse robe and obediently handing it to him. Golden Lotus Taoist uncorked it, sniffed the medicine, and confirmed its excellent quality. He thought, "The Sword Heaven sect is truly wealthy. I haven't made any pills myself for years." With a tinge of envy, he gently opened Lena's mouth and prepared to give her the medicine. Qian Yu leaned in, looking curiously at her, fixated on the mysterious number 5. Her lips were thin, her nose well-defined, and her skin a healthy wheat color. She perfectly fit the image of a spirited girl from southern regions. In the corridor, Qian Yu turned to Chu Yuanshan and asked, "Hero, do you know what kind of monster this is?" The well-read Chu Yuanshan replied, "It's probably a Zhanmusho. I've read about them. In ancient times, people would place exotic beasts in tombs to serve as guards for the crypt. Initially, there would be a large number of these beasts, and in order to survive, they would consume one another or feed on whatever they could find, until their numbers dwindled. Over generations, they adapted to the Yin energy. By devouring corpses and poisonous creatures in the tomb, they evolved beyond recognition, completely different from their ancestors." Hong Yuan asked, "Are their corpses valuable?" Chu Yuanshan shook his head. "After absorbing so much filth and decay, they're worthless." Su Qian pragmatically turned his gaze away, losing interest in the vile remains. He instructed Zhongli, "Take care of him, carry him on your back, and stay close to me. If you stray too far, I can't protect you." Golden Lotus Taoist hesitated at the arrangement. After all, number 5 was already injured. Asking him to follow the unpredictable fortune teller seemed a bit harsh. But considering the young man's great luck, perhaps nothing too terrible would happen. Su Qian then addressed the survivors of the Hutu gang. He reassured them and said, "Stick close to us. We'll lead you out of here." The gang leader looked at the departing experts, recalling the battle earlier. The seemingly humble green-clad swordsman must have been one of the central figures of the heavenly human conflict, and that formidable Buddhist monk. He could vanquish the wicked creatures barehanded. As for the young 6th-grade fighter, he seemed ordinary enough. In the gang leader's eyes, a 6th-grade practitioner of copper skin and iron bones, taking a beating was expected. That's why Su Qian's performance was unremarkable just now. He didn't do anything too extraordinary. As these thoughts circulated, the gang leader heard Su Qian beside him exclaim excitedly, "We're out of the maze." At the end of the corridor was a vast burial chamber. In its center lay a large bronze coffin, and there were some burial items scattered around. However, Zhongli cautioned, "This place may not be influenced by the maze spell, but don't celebrate too soon. If we keep moving forward, we'll just end up deeper in the tomb." Golden Lotus Taoist chimed in, "To leave this tomb, there might be 2 ways. One is to delve into the main tomb, to uncover the identity of the tomb's master. The other is to return to the outer layer and find a way out of the maze spell." Chu Yuanshan cautioned, "This tomb isn't ordinary. If we venture into the main tomb rashly, I fear it will be extremely dangerous." Su Qian nodded in agreement with Chu's suggestion. "Let's head back to the outer layer. With my fortune, we might just stumble upon a way out after a few more rounds." Other than the unconscious Lena and the indecisive Zhongli, the Heaven and Earth Society members all agreed that returning the same way was the correct choice. But following Su Qian through the labyrinth, they eventually found themselves back at the Angel again. Su Qian immediately led everyone onward again. After some time, they returned yet again. After another quarter of an hour, Su Qian stared at the tomb chamber in front of him in frustration. Damn it, we've come back here again. Chu Yuanjin gave up. Let's not go back into the labyrinth. That illusion array can never be fully escaped. If we want to leave this tomb, we must enter the focus and look for clues. Su Qian nodded helplessly. Everyone follow me, and we'll find the way into the focus. At this moment, the old man in the filthy long robe reminded them, if you do enter the focus, I must warn you, don't use the forgetting book here, no matter what. Su Qian cast a neutral glance at him. This old man was likely the wild sorcerer mentioned earlier. Where did he come from? Had he been in the group all along? Gong Yang-su chuckled. The owner of this tomb is no ordinary person. Seeing things you shouldn't see is never a good idea. This was a lesson the old man had learned through years of tomb raiding. You formal sorcerers never care for such work. You just lack experience. The leader glanced at Zhongli, the stern sorcerer with the evil man vibe. Turns out the quiet ones are always the most capable. Indeed, it's often the silent types who turn out to be the key players. He then looked at Su Qian, thinking him to be the least important of them all. Zhongli nodded, indicating that he understood. He absolutely wouldn't cast any spells, nor would he engage in any battles. This was the conclusion drawn by a seasoned seer. Su Qian looked at the wooden door ahead. If they had returned to this chamber 3 times, there could only be 2 explanations. Either it was due to the proper method, or there is some special reason. I keep ending up back here. Su Qian took a deep. This feeling of uncertainty brought back the childhood fears he had when watching horror movies. Su Qian placed his hands on the door and pushed. With a heavy, grinding sound, the stone door slowly opened inward. He stepped forward holding the torch, scanning with his divine sense. Thankfully, no danger was detected. But just as he was about to move further in, the light was suddenly swallowed by darkness. Su Qian saw the torch dim for a moment, and quickly said, "Wait, there's no air inside." He then asked Zhongli, "Do you have any anti-poison pills? Give some to the Huda gang brothers." Gong Yang-su laughed. "No need, we've already taken anti-poison pills." They waited outside for a while. Su Qian took 1 step into the tomb chamber. There were no danger signals, and the torch didn't dim. This made him feel relieved. He then said, "I'll go ahead first. You follow behind me. Remember, don't do anything unnecessary." The Huta gang members nodded firmly. By now, not just the gang leader, but even the regular members, could see Su Qian's low standing, being the scout in front, taking the risks as the shield. Such was the crude role of a warrior. But Su Qian didn't see it that way. "I've been at the forefront this whole time, making the biggest contribution. Even the Taoist elders rely on me." At this point, Gong Yang-su turned to Taoist Jinlian and suggested, "Judging by the layout of this tomb, the central area must be where the tomb owner's remains are kept. I suggest we avoid that area for now. Let's explore along the walls first and estimate the size of this chamber. In the meantime, we might find some valuable information." Taoist Jinlian nodded in agreement. Su Qian muttered to himself, "From what he's saying, it's clear he's a seasoned tomb raider. But hey, I'm the leader here. Why didn't they consult with me?" Su Qian led the group to start exploring to the left. They moved cautiously until they came across a huge mural. Taoist Jinlian raised his torch to illuminate the mural and carefully interpreted its details. It was said that a terrifying giant serpent had once invaded a human city. When it coiled up, its body towered higher than the city walls. At that time, a Taoist on a flying sword descended from the heavens and slew the giant serpent. The emperor of the city, along with his ministers, came out to greet the Taoist. They bowed and knelt before him. The Taoist stood on his flying sword in midair, gazing down at the emperor and ministers below. Su Qian frowned and asked, "Could there really be such a huge snake? Was it a demon beast?" Taoist Jinlian replied, "Indeed, there are certain demon races with exceptional talents. Some are enormous, but not to such an exaggerated degree. Also, if you knew that demon beasts form demon cores at higher ranks, you wouldn't think that the snake in the mural was a demon beast." Chu Yuanjin frowned and asked, "Forming demon cores? Do you mean that as they rise in rank, their bodies actually shrink?" Taoist Jinlian didn't hold back. Having a large body isn't necessarily a good thing, though it does bring greater strength. It also exposes many vulnerabilities. The most notable beings renowned for their enormous size and great power were the ancient gods and demons. However, in the era when they thrived, humans were still in their infancy, still in the tribal age. So, the snake depicted in the mural is likely a descendant of those ancient gods and demons, not a true god or demon. Chu Yuanjin nodded slightly. The Taoist's words aligned with his own thoughts. Hung Yuan added, "Even so, for the Taoist to slay such a large snake, his strength must be extraordinary." Taoist Jinlian continued interpreting the mural. The emperor, in gratitude, built a high platform for the Taoist and led the civil and military officials in worship. But the Taoist with the blurry face, he swung his sword and killed the emperor, then put on the imperial robes, wore the crown, and usurped the throne. Su Qian was dumbfounded. What kind of deity is this? He kept reading. Master Hung Yuan frowned and said, someone with such great power shouldn't be fixated on authority. What's the point of becoming emperor for him? Taoist Jinlian continued. The subsequent murals depict a war. After the Taoist emperor quashed the rebellion, he became debauched. He was surrounded by countless naked women. Then the men and women increased, with countless individuals of both genders mingling. Chu Yuanjin's face darkened. Is the mural suggesting that the emperor later indulged in dual cultivation, becoming an ardent practitioner of Taoist dual cultivation techniques? Taoist. It seems this emperor had a deep connection to the dual cultivation school of Taoism. Su Qian asked, could that Taoist have been the founder of the dual cultivation sect? Taoist Jinlian shook his head, indicating he did. Then he continued interpreting the remaining content. Finally, heaven seemingly grew displeased with the emperor's foolish behavior. One day, dark clouds gathered, and a thunderbolt struck him dead. Thus, the emperor met his end. The mural concluded there. The gang leader's jaw dropped. What an absurd story, he exclaimed. Su Qian looked puzzled. Some parts don't make sense. Even our wise and brilliant Feng emperor knew to revise the official history books to cover up flaws. If the tomb's owner is the emperor depicted in the mural, then these blatant details would be self-criticism in the mural. Hung Yuan said, since he was struck dead by lightning, this tomb must have been built by his later ministers. Criticizing him makes sense. Su Qian glanced at him. It doesn't make sense. If this were the emperor's own tomb, he wouldn't have allowed self-criticism on the murals. If it was built by others, then it would be unlikely to spend so much light steel and bricks building his tomb, not to mention the powerful maze array outside. Taoist Jinlian repeatedly nodded, clearly agreeing with Su Qian's explanation. With the strength of this Taoist, ordinary thunder could not have killed him. Could the lightning have a different meaning? Taoist Jinlian succinctly replied, that was a heavenly tribulation. Su Qian pressed, are you sure you didn't see it wrong? Taoist Jinlian explained, a second-grade Taoist undergoes a tribulation. If they survive it, they become a first-grade land immortal. This is not something that can be compared to a prophet's foresight, or even divine punishment. The last generation's leader of the human sect was completely obliterated during a heavenly tribulation. Chu Yuanjin subconsciously gulped. A lightning tribulation capable of killing a second-grade Taoist is truly terrifying. Su Qian thought to himself, so second-grade Taoists face heavenly tribulations, and first-grade are land immortals. I remember Taoist Jinlian mentioned that the Earth sect leader fell to demonic influence because he failed his tribulation and ultimately became a demonic cultivator. Hung Yuan added, so the emperor was a second-grade Taoist, and a peak second-grade at that, just a step away from becoming a land immortal. Taoist Jinlian nodded and said, that Taoist died in a heavenly tribulation, leaving no body behind. This tomb must only be ceremonial, so there shouldn't be much danger. The gang leader and his members laughed cheerfully at this, feeling reassured. Now we can relax. Su Qian's face suddenly stiffened. Taoist, don't tempt fate. Don't you know it's bad luck to say things like that now? At that moment, Chu Yuanjin remarked, besides the mural, there's nothing else of value here. Going through this passage should lead us to the notable coffin. Let's go take a look. Su Qian walked ahead with his torch, candles lining both sides of the passage. It seemed the wax was refined from the oil of an eastern sea red dragon. One of these candles can burn for decades without going out. Also, pay attention to the pools on both sides. There could be evil entities hiding in the water. Not long after, they reached the end of the passage. There was a staircase that rose tens of meters. Su Qian went up first. As he neared the top, he was startled by the skeletal remains on both sides. Taoist Jinlian said calmly, they're just skeletons. Everyone, don't touch them recklessly. Following behind him, they finally reached the highest point. It was completely empty all around, except for 4 ancient corpses and a sarcophagus in the center. Chu Yuanjin said, this sarcophagus must belong to the tomb owner. Looking around the layout, there seems to be some significance here. Taoist Jinlian noted, the bodies of the 4 ancient corpses are inscribed with runes. The one in the west governs metal, while the south, north, and east govern water, fire, and wood, respectively. The young woman added, the center governs earth. All things in heaven and earth are transformations of the 5 elements. The ancients believed that after death, one was buried in the earth. By arranging a 5-element formation in the tomb, they believed that the dead would one day be reborn from the soil. Su Qian reasonably pointed out a suspicion. This doesn't add up. Taoist, didn't you say that person died from the tribulation, leaving nothing behind? Then if there's nothing in this coffin, how can they be reborn? Taoist Jinlian shook his head. I don't know. I can't figure it out either. Let's go. There's no clue here for us. Su Qian had no choice but to abandon the matter. Since it had come to this, they couldn't delve deeper. He could only follow them out. But just as he turned to leave, a hoarse voice came from the coffin behind him. You've arrived. Su Qian's steps halted abruptly. Then he tried to recall whether he had just imagined that. Taoist Jinlian noticed something and asked, what's wrong? Su Qian opened his mouth, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he started trembling uncontrollably. He forced himself to stay calm, but his voice was tinged with fear. As he said, "I heard someone speaking from inside the coffin." As soon as he spoke, the coffin behind him began to creak. The atmosphere in the chamber plummeted. A sinister aura spread. The members of the Heaven and Earth Society and the Hutu gang immediately panicked. One by one, they screamed and turned to flee. But in the next moment, those who tried to escape the chamber froze in place. It wasn't that they wanted to stay, but their blood seemed frozen. The icy aura enveloping them made it feel as if they were in a glacial environment. Their bodies and blood were completely frozen. If Taoist Jinlian had been in cat form, his fur would have bristled. At the same time, the armor-clad mummified guards all turned their heads, silently fixing their gaze on everyone. The sight was horrifyingly eerie. A massive wave of fear exploded within. The group of tomb raiders, already not very professional, each displayed a look of utter terror. Beads of sweat dripped from Chu Yuanjin's forehead. The sword on his back occasionally quivered slightly, as if it wanted to be, but was suppressed by some invisible force. Su Qian heard the unsettling sound of bones grinding nearby, and cursed silently. This coffin chamber really is dangerous. I don't know whether this is Zhongli's fault or mine, or both. At that moment, an image surfaced in his mind, a green-furred hand, reaching out of the bronze coffin, grasping the edge. A figure inside the coffin slowly sat up, a mummified corpse clad in a yellow robe. Its skin was tightly stretched over its bones. Its nose rotted away, leaving just 2 holes. Su Qian's spiritual senses caught sight of this, and a chill ran down his spine. Taoist Jinlian is unreliable. He said the body would be completely obliterated, but lying in that coffin is indeed that second-grade Taoist. After a moment of silence, the first sound of footsteps was heard. The mummified figure stepped out, slowly walking toward the group from the bronze coffin. Just thinking about it sent chills down their spines. Thankfully, after a few steps, it stopped. Then came the sound of clashing armor pieces. It spread throughout the chamber. The mummies at the corners of the platform and on the stairs all knelt down, one by one, worshipping someone among the crowd. The sinister and dreadful aura quickly dissipated. A hoarse, deep voice echoed throughout the chamber. "Welcome, Lord, to your return." As the words fell, the group suddenly found themselves able to move again. Chu Yuanjin telepathically sent a message to everyone, including the tomb raiders. Don't act rashly. At the same time, a thought crossed his mind. Lord, who could be the master of these mummies? Could it be you, Taoist? Jinlian shook his head slightly, indicating he had no idea what was going on. He was equally baffled. Chu Yuanjin fell into deep thought. Very well, he thought. They wouldn't have much connection to Taoism. Zhongli is a disciple of the 4 heavenly swords. Lina belongs to the ancient tribes of the southern territories. The Hutu gang members didn't seem to possess profound skills either. At a certain moment, he suddenly turned his head, staring intently at Su Qian. He recalled the reason the group ended up in the coffin chamber. It was because of Su Qian's repeated coincidences that they entered the chamber. It turned out that nothing was random. This realization struck Chu Yuanjin with a sudden awareness. He found himself involuntarily standing up. Su Qian, on the other hand, was overwhelmed with confusion and panic. They're kneeling to me, calling me master? He didn't know how to respond to this situation at all. There were only 2 possibilities. Either he really was the master of the yellow-robed mummy, an identity too terrifying to fathom, or the mummy had mistaken him for someone else. The first possibility was hard to grasp for now. If it were the second, if the mummy had made a mistake, then asking questions could expose his true identity. That would spell disaster for everyone. Realizing this, Su Qian suppressed his chaotic emotions, stood confidently with his hands on his hips, and stared coldly at the yellow-robed mummy. Good work, soldier, he said. The members of the Hutu gang were stunned. It turned out that the master the mummy referred to wasn't the Taoist of the Earth sect, but that crude second-grade martial artist, a mere second-grade warrior. At this moment, the yellow-robed mummy spoke in a low, puzzled voice. Why has the master not ascended to immortality? This question hit Su Qian like a thunderclap. Ascend to immortality? What does that even mean? By my understanding, ascending to immortality means transcending grades, becoming a peer to the Buddha, the valley god, and the shaman god. So who exactly was the yellow-robed mummy's master? This is way too terrifying. I just randomly entered a tomb, and I encountered an existence of this level? It must be Zhongli's fault. It has to be his fault. As these thoughts raced through his mind, Su Qian's gaze suddenly sharpened. You dare give me orders? The mummy trembled in fear, lowering its head and shaking. Master, please forgive me. Master, forgive me. It pleaded, and did something no one expected. It extended its withered right hand towards its own chest. With a squelch, it stabbed in without hesitation, and pulled out an object. It wasn't a heart, but a translucent jade seal. Master, is this what you came for? You left it in me long ago, asking me to care for it properly. I have kept it safe all this time. Now I return it to you. Su Qian accepted it instinctively, thinking to himself, this is a treasure of immortals. I really shouldn't take it. If the immortal comes looking for it later, I'll be doomed. But if I don't accept it, my true identity will be exposed to the mummy. Damn it, I'm dead either way. I'll just take the big gamble. At that moment, the mummy spoke again in its raspy voice. Tell me, what year is it now? Su Qian replied calmly. The current dynasty in the Central Plains is the Defying dynasty. The mummy murmured humbly. Defying dynasty? How long have I been asleep? Su Qian was frantically complaining in his mind. How the hell should I know? Why don't you come with me? I'll hand you over to the authorities, and let the researchers figure it out. He replied indifferently. Time holds no meaning to us. Isn't that so? Taoist Jinlian felt a surge of excitement, and silently praised him. That was a perfect response. Su Qian caught the appreciative look from Ning, who gave him a signal. It's about time to end this. Figure out a way to get out of here. Su Qian immediately understood. Return to your slumber, he said coolly. As the mummy's master, he felt no need to explain to the mummy why he was taking the jade seal. Fewer words and a cold demeanor suited the persona. Without showing any expression, Su Qian turned the jade seal. Noticing characters carved on the bottom, he only managed to catch a few words before the seal disintegrated into white sand, slipping through his fingers. Suddenly, an indescribable force, as vast as the tide, surged through his arm and into his body, causing intense dizziness. It felt as if something within him was awakening. At the same time, the mummy raised its head abruptly, its hollow eye sockets gleaming faintly with bloodlight. You are not the master. The hoarse voice echoed through the tomb, tinged with intense rage and murderous intent. Taoist Jinlian reacted the fastest, swinging his sleeve to stir a gale, sending the Hutu gang tomb raiders and Chu Yuanjin off the high platform. But as he turned back to help Su Qian, the mummy's desiccated hand was already reaching out. Jinlian instantly moved to block it. Run, he shouted. I'll hold it off. Su Qian pressed a hand on his shoulder. He was determined to stay behind and face the mummy's wrath. Then a surge of power exploded from his palm, sending Taoist Jinlian flying like a cannonball. As Jinlian tumbled through the air, he saw the mummy grab Su Qian's neck, lifting him high off the ground. Jinlian could do nothing. All he could do was let out a powerless roar, releasing his frustration and helplessness.